Jazz here, and I am so digging the Geekcast radio network.
Greetings, humans. This is Starscream, and you're listening to Toycast. And if any of you call me a parts former one more time...
Now, Toycast. Oh, yes. Listen in to the only toy podcast you will ever need.
Hello and welcome to Toycast. This is episode 170, and we are officially on the road to 200 episodes, folks. We got 30 to go. I'm sure we can make it because I already have episode 171 and 172 planned, so there's that. We just came off of episode 169 where I kind of talked a little bit about some inappropriate Transformers, and my buddy Steve Megatron and I talked about the Hasbro fan stream for Transformers that was on their Hasbro Pulse YouTube channel January 31st, 2023. Hey, look at that, folks. I didn't screw the year up. I am, of course, TFU and Mike. Joining me, kinda, sorta, almost, as always, is Josh, the FloorBurger.
Greetings, and I'm hoping my attendance becomes more regular and frequent, so people learn who I am.
People know who you are. It's just that half the time I'm doing Origins, and I prefer those be one-on-one than some other form of math that I don't want to get into right now. We are here because you have a top 20 toy talk topics for the last 20 years of your collecting life.
I don't think I'm going to nail that level of alliteration that you just did there. So
I'm surprised I nailed that level of alliteration that I just said right there.
Yeah, I don't see me being able to even attempt that. But what I'm going to do is explain what I wanted to talk about tonight.
Ow! Ooh. Technical difficulties. Let's move on, shall we?
All right, we are back from the impromptu break here on Toycast. Josh, top 20 toys of the last 20 years. What's your idea? Explain it to everybody, and then we'll go through it. What's the genesis of you wanting to do this in episode 170 of Toycast here on the Geekcast Radio Network?
So obviously every year is the anniversary of a year. Mm-hmm. And so I started thinking about it as we've kind of discussed in other episodes. After my ma had passed this past early winter, late fall, whatever you want to talk about it, the notion of time hit me pretty hard. And I was thinking about, all right, how much time has passed since various things. And it occurred to me that I don't know what defines when you become a collector. I don't know if that's, are you seeking out a number of items and displaying them, or I don't know when you cross that line from just buying a couple things that you think are cool to you are now a collector. I don't know. I think it's when you have more boxes of your collection than you do your other personal items.
So what I will say to kind of pivot off of that is, as a kid in the 80s, slightly older than you, this is why I say I always had the luxuriousness of being born in the year 1980, because I got to go through 1-year-old, 2-year-old, 3-year-old as the years progressed. And as a kid, it was all about playing with the toys. It was all about having fun. It was all about this. It was all about that. And then, you go through your teenage years, your high school years, toys kind of disappear, the cartoons maybe still there, whatever kind of thing. And then in my personal, timeline of things, it's like, 2005, 2006, I was in a job where I was making a lot of money at the time. And I found eBay.
And then you no longer had money.
Well, I still paid my bills and all. I did all the responsible stuff first. But, like, I was spending, I can tell you right now, Generation 1, 1984 Optimus Prime, 1985 Blaster, and 1985 Soundwave. The three of those figures cost me about $600. 120, 150, and 150. So basically $620 at the time off of eBay. So it was more of a thing of, oh, I remember this, or oh, I'm in this community, or oh, I'm in that community. We talked about, and we'll talk about it here, because, ladies and gentlemen, we've kind of time traveled in this episode, and there's a whole other universe where this episode exists, and we've kind of already talked about this. But at that time, in 2005, 2006, I was just starting to get to online communities and things like that, and forums and whatever else. And I think for me, the definition of when you become a toy collector is when you rediscover the toys that you grew up with. When you go onto eBay and say, hey, I really wish I had my old 1984 Optimus Prime from Transformers Generation 1. Or I wish I had the, alligator. Oh, Steve Megatron's going to kill me.
No.
Was it the alligator Megatron and the bat Optimus Prime? Whatever it is. Like
that's back when it was still supposed to be the original.
Yeah. So,
characters.
But again, same thing with Masters Classics. I had that in 2011, 2012, when I started getting Masters Classics, it was because for 30 years at that point, because my mom didn't. Mom passed in 2015. Yeah, no. So mom. Okay. So I'm trying to make sure I keep my own timeline straight here. 2012 was the 30th anniversary of Masters of the Universe, or at least of the cartoon anyway, because I know the toys kind of started in 1982, but the cartoon started in '83 or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So in 2012, my mom was like, here, please take this castle. I've been dragging it around to every place I've lived for you for the last 30 years. Okay. And my Castle Grayskull, it was the original Castle Grayskull, but I didn't have it was just the hollowed out thing that you could open up.
The shell.
Yeah, it was just the shell of it. But I loved the shell of it because the one thing I did have was I made sure I had that, as you're looking at the castle, the tallest right-hand turret. So the toys could, whoever, like Prince Adam or Adora or He-Man or whatever, or Skeletor, Sorceress, I could at least have one figure standing up there, and then the rest of them I could just kind of post. So for me, it was rediscovering toys. It was rediscovering childhood. That's how I define going from being a kid and playing with toys to becoming a collector. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I think, like I said, even though I made the joke that when you have more boxes of your collection than you do your personal stuff was kind of the line for me, I still have a memory of, I don't remember what year it is. I roughly could guess when it was, but I had a 2-door 1990 Cavalier that I drove when I was in college. So it was about 12 years old, a tiny little car. You couldn't really fit much in it. And I remember I couldn't close my trunk when I was moving out of my dorms because it was so full of some of the boxes of stuff I had been collecting in my dorm, which, by the way, you wouldn't think this, but, having toys up on your shelf don't exactly get you the positive bit of attention you would hope in 2002, 2003. So
now, see, that's a whole other, obviously this is your conversation, this is your whatever, but that topic, that thing of the you're a toy collector, or the thing of, for me it was like grandparents or aunts or uncles, sometimes mostly grandparents and people that didn't understand it, but it's like, you still play with toys? I'm playing with, you know what I mean? But that's a whole other episode topic that we could talk about. Like, where did this negativity towards going into, let's say, a college dorm room in 2002 or 2003 and someone seeing a Kevin Costner not really look-alike Waterworld toy on your shelf, and and
we'll touch on that briefly because about how I started collecting in college. That's actually one of the first points. But so really the genesis of this idea was I'm actually hitting a point where I would say it's been 20 years since I started as a collector, since I became a collector, buying, selling, all that stuff.
Yep.
It's been about 20 years. And my freshman year of college started, and I was in this crossroads that some people hit when they turn 17, 18, they go off to college, and it's a new world. You're out of your familiar place. You're basically camping for 8 months out of the year,
Right.
And a massive aspect of that for me was trying to figure out my place and to become comfortable. I didn't do well my freshman year of college, not necessarily grade-wise. My grades were average to decent. It was more, I was just struggling finding my identity. Who was I? I was not someone who went partying in high school. I had a small group of friends. I generally preferred playing Nintendo all night versus going out partying. But a lot of the people that were in my social circle were people who went out partying, who hung out, who did all sorts of things that my sort of social anxiety-driven sense of the world was not having. And so I struggled my first semester of my freshman year. And I went through my first semester almost considering dropping out at one point, but luckily a lot of the right people in my life really pushed me not to. And not dropping out, just not returning for my spring semester, not dropping out. There's a difference.
Yeah, and you're not. You've completed like your first half of, let's say, freshman year, that fall semester, first semester. You've completed it. You've gotten grades for it. You've gotten the credits for it.
Yeah.
But something has changed, and you're not going to go back to that second semester at that particular school. You're going to do something else. Yeah.
Yeah, and I made a couple of really bad choices just in terms of where my focus was supposed to be then, and they say you should never live with regrets, but okay, so I don't live with regrets, but I just live with the knowledge of some really bad choices I've made, and nothing harmful, nothing bad. Just instead of taking on a great opportunity, I chose the easy and the safe. Right. And when you do that, there's not a lot of growth, and that's just the reality of things. But regardless, when I got back, things were kind of blah. I was still struggling, still trying to figure out who I wanted to be. And I took a walk one day to go get a haircut. And right next to the place where I got my haircut was a comic shop. And I go in the comic shop. And it was, the only way I could describe it, was called Acme Comics. It was a guy who was a hipster before being a hipster was being a hipster. Okay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's the only way I can describe it.
Yeah.
He was an OG townie. He bought the shop. He made the shop his own. I remember talking to him one time, and he's like, everything in the shop is mine. I just choose to sell it. Right. Instead of it being like shop stock. And that was my first exposure to, a smaller independent comic and toy shop that just people would bring in kitschy, weird stuff. And I loved it. It was totally my environment. It was totally my flavor of I'd walk in there, he'd be showing Lord of the Rings or Star Wars or whatever would be on the TVs in there, and he didn't care if I just stood there and watched Lord of the Rings for 2 hours. It was just that inviting and comfortable of a place, but it's also where I started buying figures. So I started buying everything from Kenner Star Wars just out of the dig bins, or I started buying Marvel Legends, and I still remember my first couple Marvel Legends that I bought were from this shop in 2002, 2003, and it became my go-to when I was needing to get out of my dorm because I was a bit of a shut-in. When I needed a walk, when I needed to go somewhere, I would just walk out there in between classes, and for $10, I'd have a bag of new toys. And that's when I started putting this stuff, and I thought it was more ironically humorous when I was putting them up on our meager bookshelves. The dorms we lived in had not been upgraded or modified since maybe the late 70s or early 80s, and we're talking about 2002, 2003.
Yep.
So you had your side of the room, you had 3 bookshelves, a small bulletin board, and a tiny corner desk. That's what I had. It was maybe...
So wait, where did the bed go?
Well, let's say the room was maybe I don't know.
18 by 18 by 18.
No, smaller than that, dude. It was just a little bit bigger than some jail cells. Like, at least I had a closet with a dresser, but
Nice.
it wasn't anything spectacular. You had a tiny little bit amount of space. So this comic shop, though, was sort of what made me into a collector. I got to learn a lot from the owner because he knew a lot about buying and selling toys. He knew a lot about a lot of toy lines that were out there. He was very knowledgeable about comics, and he was one of those guys who you would have thought went to business school, but his business school was just his experience working at these places and learning on his own, which a lot of the best comic shops are owned by guys who are like that.
Yeah.
I've never really gone to a comic shop that was ever owned by someone who knew a ton about business and, ran their own companies or whatever and had business degrees. They just could not run something like a collectible shop. It was the guys who sort of grew up in it that managed them the best.
Yeah.
So the comic shop really became a big part of my life because I would go out, check Target, Toys R Us, Walmart. I had no bedtime. I had no concept of time. I sometimes slept 3-4 hours a night because I was in my late teens, early 20s. So, health didn't matter to me. And so I could go to Target, or not Target, Walmart, because it was 24 hours. Yeah. And at 1 a.m. when they're stocking the shelves, I'd have my pocket knife with me, and I would be digging through the pallets of stuff that was being stocked. And I would get the newest, rarest, hardest to find action figures, bring them back to the comic shop. He'd either give me store credit or cash. And that's kind of what I did for 4 years in college. Yeah. And that got me really ingrained into collecting. And then to jump on that, I had extra money to spend on eBay. Just like you said, I started discovering eBay in 2003.
Okay.
And one of my first discoveries was that in 2002, 2003, Beast Wars was not a very popular toy line. It still doesn't sell for a ton, but at the time, I think I bought a massive collection of Beast Wars for, I don't know, $50, $60.
Wow.
And I can't even remember how many were in there, but it was almost every single one you could possibly think of. The big ones, the little ones. I think the only one who wasn't in there was Depth Charge, who's one of the biggest.
Yes, Depth Charge, fish pants.
Yeah, he was the only one who wasn't in there, and I eventually got him another time. But that was my really big foray into buying large lots. Mm-hmm. And so I had all the Transmetals, all the originals. I don't remember if everybody was in there, but one of the reasons I really loved Beast Wars is that it was very posable. Mm-hmm. And the later Beast Wars, the Transmetal 2s especially, yep, whether you left them transformed or you didn't, they were a little bit more cohesive. They weren't really shell formers, I think. Yeah. I think you know that phrase.
Oh, yeah. We've been running a toy podcast for X number of years now, yeah. I mean, so Beast Wars is big here at the GCRN. Co-creator Steve Megatron. Megatron is his favorite character in Beast Wars. He has, he can actually do the voice and all that. I can't do the voice, so I just have a button.
Yes.
So, we know all about Beast Wars around here. This is one of the reasons why I'm glad this is part of your journey, because I'm interested to hear, you and I have never, we've talked Transformers off air, but we've never really talked Transformers. So yeah, I mean, Beast Wars was interesting at the time. It was
yeah, and I'm looking at some pictures of Beast Wars figures right now. And you can see that there's a little bit of an evolution. And the reason I like them is that I liked collecting in almost a guerrilla style, where it was, I wanted everything in a combined universe, but I wanted them to be kind of subtle, kind of blend in a little bit. And I can't really come to a full, strong definition of it, but a lot of the later Transmetal figures, that's what made up the bulk of this box, were your Transmetal 2 Iguanus or Jawbreaker, or some of these figures that when you transformed them, they typically didn't have the giant chunks of animal parts hanging off of them. They stayed pretty cohesive. And that's why I got into those later than I did, for instance, if you look back at the original Snarl, or Razor Beast is a great example that when he transforms, even though he looks really cool, I'm trying to find a good picture of him, he just has giant chunks of a warthog hanging behind him.
Yep.
It's a great feature where it's a quick auto transformation, but those weren't the ones I was after. I was after the ones that kind of looked like a character in either one of their modes, and they functioned with other toys in a similar scale. That's just what I liked. That was just me.
Yeah.
But I remember getting this huge box now in my dorm, and I think this is still pretty standard to this day. We had basically your P.O. box for your dorm number. So you'd go down, you'd have your key, you'd open it up, and you'd have a card if you had a package. And I remember pulling the card. Oh, I have a package. Cool. And I go to the desk, and usually it was just some, late teens, early 20s worker at the front desk, just someone who lived there. They didn't really care about their job very much.
Right.
And he kind of threw the box at me, and I ran back upstairs, and I waited until my roommate at the time was out, because I still was keeping my toy collection a little secretive. I wasn't really putting it out there to a lot of people. I had a couple figures on my shelf, but I did know that, again, I'm a freshman in college. If a girl happened to randomly walk into my room, I don't want them to think that, oh, this is not a guy I want to talk to, there it is. Yes, exactly. And so a lot of those figures I had intended to take home to do outdoor toy photography with, because I had a huge yard. It wasn't like in my current house, I don't really have a spot that I can take a picture where you don't see a man-made object like a fence or patio table or my house. But in my old house, I had this huge backyard and tons of wilderness, so you could easily find a spot that you would not see a man-made object for anything. So that was my original intent, and we'll get to it later where I plan things in depth but never get to them. But when I got the Beast Wars figures, it wasn't really even so much that I liked Transformers. They just were really, really good figures, and they were cheap and easy to come by. And it was even before I was really going to stores at the time. I was very much still just getting little things here and there at comic shops. I wasn't going to Walmart because I was a freshman in college or sophomore in college. I didn't have easy access to go to Walmart yet. I didn't have my car down at school yet.
Yeah.
So Beast Wars was a very much a gateway into buying online. And we'll come back to that later, because looking for that huge lot got me into looking for lots of other older figures that were still cheap, which are not cheap anymore, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, no.
So let's fast forward a little bit to the end of 2003.
Yes, the Action Figure Fellowship. Oh, Lord.
Yeah. Way to sound excited. But
hello, I'm thinking Fellowship. I'm thinking his 11st birthday. I'm thinking there's one ring. That's why I said, oh, Lord.
So I'm trying to keep a lot of these anecdotes and these stories short. When I first went to college, when I was a freshman, one of the last things my mom bought me before I went off to college was the VHS of Fellowship of the Ring. And I can't tell you how many times my freshman year I tried to watch that and failed. Can't even begin to tell you how many times I would watch it, I would fall asleep. I don't know what it was. I didn't know if it was the accents. I'm not even sure. I was just not a sophisticated young man at that point. And I go over to the comic shop. I go over to Acme Comics, and like I had mentioned that he was showing Lord of the Rings one day. He was showing a bootleg DVD of The Two Towers, because in December of 2003, that's when it had come out.
Yep.
So he was showing a bootleg version, and it was the Helm's Deep battle. And I had never seen anything like that in cinema before. I was immediately taken with this movie, and I realized I have the VHS, I have the first movie. I'm going to go home during break and watch this. So that's what I do. So I go home during break and I watch Fellowship of the Ring and loved it. And I went out to theaters and saw The Two Towers. And then I go to the toy stores. I go to Target. I go to all those different places and I see the toys that were available for this. And they were incredible. Mm. The toy line, if you've ever seen some examples of it, is very detailed, has a lot of paint apps, it has a lot of sculpted details that you don't really see in a lot of toys at that time, at that price point. Now, we would later find out from Scott Knightlick that the reason why that toy line was so cheap and so plentiful and so unique was because Toy Biz was not paying their factories.
Yeah, that's not good.
No, not good. And so I really got into it. The toys were affordable. They were $6.99, $7.99, I think. And you got a lot with them. And I got vibes of the Kevin Costner. God, I'm saying, I'm trying to think.
Waterworld.
Excuse me.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So a lot of vibes of that. Not because of the soft goods, but because the Robin Hood figure came with a bow and a bunch of loose arrows. And so did Legolas. And so did a lot of other characters. So I started buying up that line. It was cheap. It was easy to find. It was plentiful. And it was very exciting. So I'm getting ready to go back to school. And I'm adjusting better. I'm doing better. I'm more focused on school and having a better time. And I decided I wanted to create a fellowship of my own because I didn't have all the figures from Lord of the Rings, because even though they're plentiful, you couldn't just go out and buy the entire Fellowship of Nine. I don't remember who the 9 was, but I remember creating my own Fellowship of 9 figures, both of vintage and modern, that would always travel to and from school with me. And I think at this point I did have my car, so I went back and forth very often. And it was just my own little secretive thing. I didn't go and tell people about it. It was just my secretive thing that they would come out. I would put them on my shelf while I was in a different dorm room at this point, a different building. And they were the only 9 that I had down there. But when I would get new toys from the comic shop or from the Toys R Us down there, they would kind of hang out with the new toys. I'd drive home. Everything would go with me. I'd leave the new ones up at home, and then I would come back with the 9 and go back and forth like that. They were basically there to guide these figures in my head canon back and forth. So I just had this massive head canon of this journey while I was at school, which sounds kind of ridiculous, but it's also what allowed me to sort of cope and keep an idea of optimism for the things I was doing and give purpose. And it was my own little secretive thing. Now, was that normal for a college and sophomore at the time? Probably not. Do I care anymore? Not really.
Yeah. I mean, we're 20 years out of college at this point, so you know, your history is your history, and what happened is what happened. Like, there's no going back and changing, where that history has led you to today. But it's interesting to see and hear how, this journey has gone for you. So this action figure fellowship thing, this was just you with, creating your style at the time?
Yeah, and I think, and I know we've talked before where I've always had this sort of headcanon. I've always had this this running narrative in my brain of characters in this larger universe, and that was sort of the major guiding factor for me when I was doing a lot of collecting back then was I'm building this common scale universe that Beast Wars was still part of, Marvel Legends were part of, Muppets were part of. What else did I collect back then? Lord of the Rings was part of. All of those figures were all part of this common shared universe that I was, and we'll talk about this in a bit, writing a figure comic for.
Yes.
And I would go through some spare time in classes and jot down notes of cool story ideas and these weird crossovers. And when I'd be hunting down new toys, I would alter the story to work in these new characters that would be introduced. And I still have at least 1 or 2 notebooks filled with all these ideas and all these things I was writing down that in my head, I'm going to go home over summer break, and that's what I'm going to spend all my time doing. Now, did I? No, not in the least.
I mean, if you still have them, you should scan them in and like turn them into Word documents or something so you have a digital copy of them just to see if you could go back and try to figure out something. That would be kind of cool to see, what you would write from back then to today.
I mean, some of it is probably still very possible. Some of it's not, because I've sold a lot of the originals.
Right.
I had a lot of the Street Fighter figures from, I think it was like SOTA or Soda or whatever they're called. And they made up a large chunk. And I sold a bunch of those because those peaked in value at one point. And I decided, I'm going to sell them all.
Yeah. But, I mean, we now live in the age, and we have been living in the age of the internet. You could go on, like if you already have stuff written, you could go online and look at a picture of the thing, and you know what I mean, like not necessarily updating it, but like going back to it and seeing what you can, like, I don't know, whatever, it's your stuff. So 2004, start of Build-A-Figures and 6-inch figures.
So I think this is just one of the biggest switches for me as a collector, and I think for a lot of collectors in general, was the introduction of the Build-A-Figure. And I still remember being excited for, I believe it was Marvel Legends Series 9 with the original Galactus. And if you look at the lineup for Marvel Legends Series 9, and this is actually when they used to number them, and they were a big deal, and it was exciting, and there wasn't as much cohesion between figures in a wave as there is now. So if you look at Marvel Legends Series 9, and I can't really find the release year. It's either 04 or 05. It's Marvel Deathlock, Bullseye, Gray Hulk or Green Hulk, depending on the variant you found. And then Bullseye, you could either get a scowling or a grinning variant. That was about all there was. You could get, it really still holds up to this very day, Nightcrawler, a Doctor Strange, War Machine, and Professor X. And they each came with a piece to make Galactus. And the Bullseye figure actually would go on to become one of the more standard base bodies for a lot of later figures, because it's a pretty good uniform male base body.
Right.
But in my headcanon, it was, why are these 7 characters, with one of them essentially being a villain, coming together to fight off this new giant being who was coming to destroy or control all of the other toys? That was the chapter that got worked in. I would tell you that if I saw those in the stores without collecting, I don't even know if I'd even consider buying any of them. They were not terribly interesting to me, but the interest came from, why are these 9 together? And they come with this giant figure, which was very uncommon at the time to get a figure that was that big and that posable. So, and I believe I had the Silver Surfer figure out, and I knew that Galactus and Silver Surfer went together. So I thought, you know what, this just makes sense. I should just get it. And I remember really saving up, having to work, and really, really being scared about buying such a large chunk of figures. I think 7 figures at the time plus shipping.
Oh, wow.
Well, it was like $90 at the time.
Yeah.
If you think about it now, I mean, with figures peaking at almost $25 a pop right now.
Yeah, like, it's over 100.
That was a bargain at the time.
Oh, absolutely. It was a bargain. Hell yeah.
And the whole Build-A-Figure concept really changed collecting, I think, for anybody who likes comic figures, because you no longer were just cherry picking. There was no reason to buy everything.
Yeah.
And that was always the problem with Marvel Legends prior to this series, where you'd have the chase figures that would always get bought up, the single pack figures that would always get bought up, and then on the shelf you would just have 52 Wolverines.
Yeah. Pretty much.
And because of that, they would never restock, because most stores don't really restock until they get empty or they sell a certain amount, and then they restock after that. So after this was, I think the Sentinel came out after this, which was just an amazing figure and still holds up, I think, to this day, the Marvel Legends 10 Sentinel. And it was the same thing, the same the series at that point you would think was going to be very X-Men heavy. Let me go ahead and pull that one up. And images, give me the images. That one was kind of X-Men heavy in that it had Cyclops, Angel, Mr. Sinister, Omega Red, and Mystique, but then it had a really cool Black Panther and a first appearance Spider-Man. And at the time, not a ton of Spider-Man figures out there that were that posable, that good.
Yeah.
And for me, I bought several of the Black Panthers because not only because I had black cats and it just kind of worked out, but it looked like it was going to be a very easy Batman Beyond custom. So I actually had started the process had bought them, started painting them. It was my own interpretation of Batman Beyond, and it was kind of exciting. The overall series was great. The figures in it were all really well done. Mystique was a bit of a letdown, but the Sentinel was amazing, and those Sentinel pieces were as good as like currency in prison. I could trade a leg for a Sentinel for anything I wanted. A torso for a Sentinel, I could go and put that in one of the trade threads in some of the forums I was in. You say you had the torso, whew, doggy, you could. Man, I probably could have gotten a kidney for that, you know? And it really changed the way people traded. It changed the way people collected and hunted. And it just ballooned for me at that point. And that Sentinel I hung on to. I sold him in maybe 2014, 2015. I hung on to him for almost 10 years. And he was still in demand 10 years later. And there's not a lot of toys that do that, if you think about it. There's not a ton of toys that 10 years later people are still saying, yeah, I'll drop $150 on that.
Yeah.
So they would take a break, Marvel Legends would, for Series 11. Because it was the Legendary Riders, so it was another random grouping of characters, and they all had a vehicle, which I'm looking at. One is Marvel Legends Vengeance, who is a Ghost Rider villain or character, I don't know, and he comes with a full-size motorcycle, and you can still buy that for $10 at retail.
Oh, wow.
Now that would be considered a deluxe figure at $35, $40, $50.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
There was a Wolverine in that series who came with a motorcycle. Same thing. All of these characters came with large size vehicles for $10. It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing for the time and still is. And then in 12, what did they go back to in 12? I think I was out of college by the time they got to 12. What did I do here? They're not even numbering it. They're not even numbering it anymore. But they would start shrinking down some of their waves. They would start shrinking down their Build-A-Figures. They couldn't do the giant Sentinel anymore. The costs were going up. I think this was getting closer to when the economy was starting to change and not work out for everybody. But regardless, that was a huge moment for me because it was no longer I'm just going to buy the Magneto or I'm just going to buy the one Iron Man. Now it's, oh, well, I can't just have this random body part. What am I going to do with it? I have to buy the whole series and make it and work that into what I'm doing. So that was one of those really big moments. So as I mentioned, one of the next big things was, holy cats, me writing all of these comics, these fiction stories about crossovers of evil toys that were trying to dominate the toy world and all these things and having battles between Superman and He-Man. And I did experiment with some pictures of characters, and a lot of it was in my backyard using that whole space. I think it had its genesis in, I'm using that phrase that you use, so I'm going to use it from now on now.
What?
Had that genesis in where did that's from you. No, it's fine. So it started in me running a tournament in a toy forum of characters at that time and just who people would think would win. So it was He-Man versus Superman. And then people are asking, oh, are we saying Superman from the comics or Superman the toy? I'm like, I don't know, dude. I'm just putting these two together because I'm going to go out and take pictures of them. I'm not sure. What do you want me to do?
Yeah.
And so it started with He-Man versus Superman, and then Superman versus Juggernaut, and Aragorn versus the Punisher, and Legolas versus Hawkeye. And I probably still have these pictures saved somewhere. And that would eventually develop into these massive stories. And the two guys who own the comic shops I would go to a lot, one back at school and one back up here, the guy who runs the one up here he still owns it now to this very day. So 20 years later, he still owns the same place.
Cool.
But he knew my buying habits were based on wanting to write these stories and what I was trying to figure out. And he kind of always make fun of it because he's like, hey, when you get it done, if you get something published, let me know, and maybe I'll put it up here at the shop for people to check out. And I was like, okay, cool, but never happened. Mm-hmm. And then I would do wrestling figure federations, which is not uncommon with people who collect wrestling figures, where you create your own little wrestling company. And I would write weekly matches and stories. And I had pages full of just, if I had my own weekly wrestling show, I would have had it booked and solid for a year with matches that I was going to take pictures of and post and do all the fun things with.
Right.
And for some reason, I could write these out for days, and I had so much fun doing it. But if you ever try to say, hey, Josh, why don't you sit down and take some of the pictures? Nope. I couldn't do it. I don't know what it was. I couldn't sit down and focus long enough beyond like one match or two. And so I never really found a method that worked for me to take the pictures, to post them somewhere, to edit them, to do all those things. I never really found that process that worked, which you probably have a process for editing shows and getting stuff written and processed in an orderly fashion. I never found that.
So it took. I'm going to interrupt you here because you're talking about me, and it's been a while since people have talked about me. So for me, it's taken.
Well, we don't have to if you don't want to.
Funny.
I'm kidding.
I know. So for me, like with podcasting, December 12th was my 14th anniversary of doing a podcast. June 1st of this year will be 50, because I'm now in year 15 of the network. Yeah. So this year on June 1st, the Geekcast Radio Network will be 14 years online. And then later in December of this year, I'll celebrate 15 years. And in all that time, it's taken me like how to figure out what to do. Like for me, it's all about the opening and the closing of the show. Yes, it's also about the content. So, if I were to post this script that we have here for this episode of Toycast that we're doing, people would see the intro, they would see the breakdown of years of your stuff, and then they would see the outro. For me, it's all about the opening and closing of the show. So people heard in the beginning of the show me saying where, like before we hit, like when we hit record, and I know this is going way off topic, but whatever, but it's one of those things where there ends up tangents on podcasts are rife with tangents. So this is a tangent. So at the beginning of this episode, people would have heard me do the intro. Normally when I say, okay, Josh, or okay, this person, or okay, that person, are you ready? I will hit record. I will give myself 10 seconds, 20 seconds, whatever. I may, wake up. I may slap myself. I may take a drink. I may do something. And then I will go into, hello and welcome to an all-new generation of Toycast as we get the origins. You know what I mean?
You just scared me a little bit there.
Sorry. Well, that's again, the point is to bring the audience in. And it's taken me 14 to 15 years to learn that. And at the end of the show, which people will hear later, but I'll do it just really quickly now, where it's like, okay, Josh, that's your history, and we're going to go to a quick ad break. We're going to come back to close the show, and then I'll go into, thank you for joining us here on the Geekcast, Radio, or Toycast, or whatever the hell it is. So for me, that learning process, like you're saying, like you've never had, it's taken me 15 years to perfect my quote unquote showmanship or personality on a podcast. You know what I mean? Like, we're up to you talking about the Build-A-Figures and writing the comic fiction, and we're about to go into forum stuff, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But like the writing comical figure fiction and figure fads that never happened, it's like, oh, this is a cool topic where we just talked about the start of your Build-A-Figure and 6-inch figures, and now it's like, okay, we're going to go into this. So I'll say something like, hey, Josh, tell us all about your comical written universe kind of thing. So it's all about presentation, performance. And,
I know.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
and you said that you just it seems like you don't have that kind of concentration, but you excel in other areas. Like,
yeah,
like you'll bring me an idea, like this idea specifically. You were like, hey, I want to do this. And I'm like, okay, give me a timeline and topics you want to talk about. I will put it in order, and I will do whatever it has to be done to make sure it sounds, the way it's supposed to sound. Kind of thing. So,
and I guess for me, it just was maybe because I was younger, maybe because I was a scattered brain and still am, but just now I understand the benefit of having a predictable routine. This is how you do things. This is the structure you use, and you stick to it, and it's valuable. I just didn't have that discipline at the time, and so I would always have these grand ideas and these big stories, and I'd be buying up figures to do X, Y, and Z. I don't really do that anymore. I mean, I still have fun with it every so often in my head, but now if I'm collecting, it's not necessarily about I'm creating this vast world. I think it's more of just I'm collecting as an expression of some theme I'm going for. But we're going to move on, and we're going to keep some of these a little bit brief as much as we can. So the next one is me discovering online forums and communities therein. And there was a small forum or small community in the superherohype.com. I think it was at one point Spider-Man Hype or something like that. Jumping into this forum and seeing other people, like-minded people, talking about the same thing as me. And it was my first foray into message boards like that and becoming active. And there were maybe 10 or 15 of us who were actually very active. And I won't ever forget just the experience I had getting to know some of these people, hearing their stories. This was basically social media before Facebook and everything took off.
Yeah, absolutely. Forums are, people will always say, oh, forums, they're rife with idiots. And they are. Sometimes they are. But like forums were social media back then. It was all about getting on your computer and logging in and checking. Like if you left a thread or a comment or a post the night before, getting up in the morning and checking it first thing to see if anyone replied. It's all about the conversation you're having with people online. Yeah.
And people were active enough that it wasn't necessarily, oh, you had to wait a couple hours. There were some people who sat there and treated it a bit like a chat, which was pretty cool. And I got to really know some people who I still talk to one person very regularly from those days. So it's been almost 20 years. And I remember when I first started talking to him, he had little kids or a kid on the way, and now his kids are off to college and stuff. So it's absolutely fascinating to me to know, wow, I've been in this that long, and like this guy has kids who are now the age we were almost at when we first started talking.
Yeah.
And so he worked a night job, and I was just a night owl. I didn't really go to bed.
Yeah.
And so he would be up, and he worked I think he worked like the front desk for a emergency room. So there'd be some nights he'd be obviously very busy, and some nights it would be very slow.
Right.
And because he had that ability, he and I became collecting allies. And he would be able to get up. I would be able to go check stuff late at night, and he'd be able to check stuff first thing in the morning. So together, we started running these massive trades. His name is Froy. F-R-O-Y. His name is Froy, and so we started working massive trades and really getting to know each other really well, sharing ideas, writing to each other, and I think I would call him a pen pal. But we really got to know each other. We actually were talking quite a bit. I see what you're doing there in the script right now.
Don't stop it.
And so that forum would also then lead me to the Fwoosh and other forums and really getting out there and learning. That's where I got to learn a lot more about the toy industry and toy collecting as a whole, of being exposed to other people who were very focused on this. And this is still when collecting was very niche. It wasn't popular. Pops weren't a thing yet. And
oh no, that didn't start till much, much later. But the thing is, 2004, 2005, 2006, that was the beginning. That was the moments of us as an online community, like you said, finding like-minded people to have discussions with, to have these pen palish types things where we are,
yeah, and
it's a lot different. So as kids in the 80s, we didn't have the internet. We had, the telephone, or we had letters, or we had, whatever. Or we would just, if they were close enough, we would just walk to our friends' houses. And we actually hung out with people in real life. Like, I went over to my friend's house where he wouldn't let me play with his Soundwave figure or whatever kind of thing. In 2004 and 2005, that all changed as we were, 25? Yeah, 25, 2005. Yeah, I think that's right. 25, 26, 27, 28 years old, 2005 to 2008, that was the beginning of all of us finding each other in these online communities and connecting. And like you said, like I already said, repeated once, like-minded people to discuss toys or movies or music or video games or whatever. That's when the online communities kind of started happening.
Yeah,
was in those years.
And the nice thing is that when it came to finding figures, is that I had other people. We created a network, and I'm looking at some other Marvel Legends that were coming out at the time that were incredibly hard to find, the variants, the chases, and stuff. And having these other people out there that knew that I was dependable, that I would help them out when I could, that's how I'm looking at some of the prices. If you go to Action Figure 411, they do an okay job having an average. I don't know how current the average prices are on some of these figures, but I'm looking at some of the Marvel Legends that used to shoot for $150, $200 that are now down to like $15.25. But in these forums, I also got to correspond with, he was one of the guys on Toy Biz Marvel Legends. I think he still works with Hasbro Marvel Legends. This guy he went by the name Jesse Falcon. It wasn't his actual name. It just was his stage name that he picked and used in the forums. But he gave a lot of background information about the design of toys, how they were built, and he would correspond with people if they were respectful of him. So I used to actually ask him some really good interview questions.
Yep.
And so I got to correspond with him quite a bit, and it really was more about the education that I got from the forums that meant more to me than some other experiences I had with collectors. So the education, but also the network I created was very valuable out of that.
Absolutely.
So I'm actually going to I'm going to swap the next 2 points on the script real quick. And I'm going to jump to the Epic Toy Hunt, and then I'll come back to the Toy Fair magazine. But speaking of this guy, Freud, we still have a trade that is probably 8 years in the making. He's got some stuff for me. I've got some stuff for him. We just haven't shipped it yet because he, living in Galveston, Texas, has dealt with a couple of hurricanes. And then there was like the pandemic, and then there's all these things. So it's been years. We still have stuff for each other. But in 2005, there was a summer day. I want to say it was 2005. Actually, this website might be able to tell me what year. Let's find out. If it's not 2005, I am just a hot liar. It was either 2004 or 2005. Doesn't really matter.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter. But he had a list of things he was looking for. I had a list of things I was looking for. And I think this is why collectors sometimes get into it. It's not always about the things. It's about the experiences, but it's also about the adventures. It's about the the trip, the hunts, the thrill of the hunt. It's chasing the dragon, which
that's okay. That's what it is for most people, and I'm not trying to bring this back to myself again. That's not what it is for me now. That's what I agree with you. That's what it was then. And go ahead, continue with your stories.
Well, yeah, and the thing is, as far as action figure hunting goes, I actually found myself being pretty good at it. Even to this day, I'm still pretty good at it. And I don't know how you get good at it. I think it's frequency. I think it's knowing timing. I think it's knowing your stores. I think it's there's a couple things that go into it. But I had a list of items that we both were looking for. I know on that list was some Muppets. I think there were some Batman figures in there. There were some Marvel Legends in there. And in my area where I lived not in the most southern part of my county, but pretty close to the southern border of Lake County, which is borders with Cook County, which is the county that Chicago's in. Mm-hmm. But if you where I was at, if you went to the southern border of Lake County, there was a Walmart and a Target across the street from each other, and you could start from there, and you could work your way up I-94 and get off at, I think it was Route 60, and then you could continue up to Grand Avenue, and you could hit in total, I think, 3 Targets and 3 Walmarts. If you traveled a little bit more, you could do maybe four of each. Yep. At least 2 Toys R Us's, 2 KB Toys at the time. Rest in peace, KB Toys.
And Toys R Us. That's not.
And Toys R Us.
Yeah.
And a comic shop. So in one day, I just was like, hey, I have the day off. I have a little extra money. I'm going to get up. Let's go see what I can find. And got in the car, had my Mountain Dew and my Egg McMuffin, and started the morning at the southern point of the county, worked my way up 94, hit everything along the way, and it was just fun. Now I feel like it's such an aggravating waste of time to go check stores. Like I'm maybe it's because I'm an old man and I'm lazy, but I worked my way up, and I found everything that was on the list. I found at the comic shop a DC Direct, I think it was Nightwing Hush, which was a rare figure at the time. I found a Marvel Legends Wolverine from Series 6. I found Palisades Muppets at Suncoast Video at the mall.
Wow.
It was just an epic hunt. Like, you don't have those anymore. I just don't think it's possible to just find the variety that I found. And I will one day find the picture and I'll send it to you so you can understand how amazing it was. Yeah. But I think the reason why that stuck with me is that when you're first starting out, this is maybe 2 or 3 years into collecting for me, and it was very, very different. I think the time of collecting in the early 2000s, there were toys of everything, and there were still toy aisles. And it was so much more plentiful than it is today, that it sticks out to me that, one, that was just a very different time in my life. I had less responsibilities. I had more opportunities to do things like that, and that's fine. I'm fine with leaving those in the past. I'm not saying I miss it and want to go back to that, but to have an epic toy hunt like that, and to feel very satisfied and remember that I don't remember every toy hunt I've ever taken. That's one of the few.
Yeah. Well, and again, you're doing this like, so the way you wrote this out, cross country or cross county hunt for, from one side to the other, and finding everything on your list and everything on Froy's list as well. It's like you are doing something for your friend. You are going to all of these stores to help him find or finish or whatever for his collection. And that's, again, if you're living near someone, or even if you aren't, and, you say, like, for example, I'm currently in Indiana, you're in Illinois, and I say, oh yeah, the Hot Topic in Gurney Mills is going to have this exclusive insert franchise here that I love figure for Funko. could you get it for me kind of thing. And it's the whole thing of, hey, this is here. If you have the time, can you go grab it and I'll shoot you the PayPal? Again, we live now in an age where it's like I could say that to you and say, hey, this is here. I can't get it anywhere else. Here's the money through PayPal. But this cross county thing, this was an adventure. This was a Clark Griswold moment for you, kind of thing, where it like you said, it's an epic toy hunt.
And I still haven't been able to find the picture. I've looked through a couple of different. I've looked through some storage devices. I haven't found. I know I haven't deleted it. I know I have it somewhere because it exists.
Okay.
But it's also, I think, as we get older, we stop having brand new experiences that we've never had before. When you're younger, you have a whole lot more. That's the first time you've ever done something. That was my first major toy hunt, but it wasn't. I didn't feel like it was a race against time. It was more, hey, if I go out and I find some stuff, awesome. If I don't find it, no big deal. I feel like that's a little less of an attitude now, where people are feeling, oh, I need to find this. If I don't find it, it's gonna be stressful. It's negative. I hate companies. Hasbro sucks. Target sucks. Walmart sucks. It was more, I'm going to find what I find.
Yeah, so what you're talking about there now is the FOMO, fear of missing out kind of stuff. Yeah. And the FOMO is real, folks, because yikes. Just in today's standards, and I'm not sure how much the FOMO was so much real back then. I'm sure it was too, but I've said this on this podcast since we brought it back with episode 100. I don't know if I'll fully stop, but if Funko ever makes an ALF, ALF, Alien Life Form, 1986 NBC television series, if they ever make a Funko Pop of ALF, Gordon Shumway, look out. I will do whatever I have to do. That is the one thing where I would feel like the fear of missing out. There have been several new Nightwing Funko Pops or several new Batman things that I've wanted that are still out there, but I haven't had a chance to get them yet.
I will say the NECA Elf, totally worth it.
Yeah, no, I know, and I understand that, but again, everyone always says, oh, Funko Pops, big scary black eyes, blah, blah, blah. They stare into your soul. Well, Alf had big black eyes, and he has a big nose. And Funko did have the Alf license at some point because they did what they called a wacky wobbler back in the day. So they've done an Alf before. I'm just waiting for them to do one now, but they're so stuck up animes. It's a whole other thing. But yeah, I mean, the whole FOMO thing, man, it doesn't really affect me because I think for me, when I stopped collecting and sold my stuff in 2011 and 2012, and I just kind of kept going and looking at, looking at news articles of this figure's coming out or that figure, it's like, oh, that's nice. I don't need it, but that's nice. Same thing with some of the Funko Pops. Right now, I'm not able to get a lot of them, and that's fine, and I'll get them eventually if I ever do, kind of thing. But it's not the end of the world for me. Whereas some people, it's the end. If they don't have it, it is the end of the motherfucking world, and it's so ridiculous.
Yeah, and it's not only that, but the level of anger they have towards not finding something.
Oh yeah.
It's interesting because I just had a conversation with my students, and we were playing a game, and it was a whole simulation, and one of my students was out in the game really early on, and we had a discussion over the rules. Were the rules fair? It was it wasn't just about we're just playing a game for fun. There was actually a lesson behind it. And I asked him, I said, why are you upset? And he's like, well, I think it's unfair. I'm like, what's unfair? He's like, well, I lost. I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, it's unfair that I lost. I'm like, but you played by the rules. You agreed to the rules, and you lost by the rules.
Fair and square, yeah.
There was no shenanigans.
Yeah.
And it's just sort of this idea now of, well, there was nothing on the shelves. Why are you feeling so much anger and hatred towards something? That's just the way things work. Somebody got there before you.
Yep.
And maybe that's the big thesis out of that toy hunt, was that if I didn't find everything I was looking for, it's okay. But everything I found was just amazing.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, you were finding amazing things both for yourself and for your friend, and you were able to get everything. Like, that's the lucky thing. You go to, let me just put a list of physical stores together. Walmart, Target, GameStop, Hot Topic. What else has whatever? You know what I mean? Like, all these places, or local comic shops that may have old action figures kind of thing. Again, you're going on an epic toy hunt, and you were able to, quote unquote, win and be successful in finding everything that you both wanted. And the thing is, like, in the 80s, folks, as a child, I had so many participation ribbons because those were a thing. And we were taught the difference and how you should act when you're winning or losing. Yes, winning you can celebrate. Yes, losing you can kind of feel down at first, but you have to look at it like you tried the best you could, but somebody else was a little bit better than you were. It's like, again, it goes back to preparing podcasts for me. Like, if somebody tells me an idea, you or Steve Megatron or my buddy Optimus Solo or, insert person here, whomever, if you guys tell me an idea and I'm like, okay, give me about 20 minutes and I'll come back to you with something that is like, okay, this is the format. This is just like this episode here, how we have gone and done the stuff. So, folks, we are going to end this epic toy hunt talk. We're going to go to a quick ad break, and then we're going to come back and talk about the act of army building right after this.
Hello, geeks and geekettes! Looking for a podcast that covers a vast array of topics? Then check out Altered Geek Unleashed, where we discuss our thoughts on this week's geeky news, tech, gaming, television shows, movies, cartoons, comics, and more. So, get altered, get geeky with the Altered Geeks. Every Friday on the Geekcast Radio Network.
Kid?
Yes?
Shut up.
Beyond the Night is the GCRN's latest review podcast. We are covering everything in the Knight Rider television universe, from the classic 80s TV series to the 1991 reunion film, Team Knight Rider, and the 2008 relaunch series as well. So join TFG and Mike and Dion the Music Man as they go in depth and Beyond the Night only on Geekcast Radio Network. You can find Beyond the Night in iTunes and on www.geekcastradio.com.
Kid?
Yes, Michael.
Just keep driving.
Like science fiction? Of course you do, or you wouldn't be listening to the Geekcast Radio Network. Well, the Mark 42's Universe podcast is an award-winning sci-fi radio show that's been around for over 10 years. We cover everything from Doctor Who to the MCU to pop culture and everything in between. A new show drops on Tuesday mornings on the GCRN website and all of the major podcast platforms. So listen to the Mark 42's Universe podcast from the universe and beyond.
What was that universal greeting again? Never mind, I remember. Ba weep grana, weep nitty bong.
Hey guys, it's Rodimus Primal, and be sure to check out my YouTube channel. Join me as I have Transformers discussions, retrospectives, toy reviews, and more. You can also follow me on Twitter at Rodimus Primal, as well as Facebook and Instagram at Rodimus Primal Show. Transform and roll out, and be sure to check out my content till all are one.
Last big party of the summer, folks. Let's go out with a bang.
On the Simplistic Reviews podcast, we talk movies. We talk TV. We talk...
Hello, Julie, what the heck are you doing?
Trying to make our spots sound more exciting by adding explosions.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you could have got the point across with sound effects, not the real thing. Car.
Download the show on iTunes or at simplisticreviews.blogspot.com.
I'm sure your insurance company will cover that.
No, they won't.
No, they probably won't.
Oh, hey! I got something!
Since 2009, we have been the premier cartoon podcast here at the Geekcast Radio Network. We are Tooncast. From taking you beyond the cartoons we grew up with to seasonal saucy toon talk, and now we get the origins of toonsters everywhere as we ask guests 30 questions about their cartoon watching experiences, plus so much more. Tooncast is back. Join me, TFG and Mike, and the rest of the GCRN crew as we give you all the toon talk you will ever need, only on the GCRN, and wherever you consume your podcasts. We are beyond good, beyond evil, beyond your wildest imagination. We are all tunes all the time here on Tooncast.
Yeah.
Hello, all sentient beings. Want the latest on everything going on in the Transformers multiverse? Check out the Transmissions Podcast Network. We've got weekly podcasts covering everything from Alpha Trion to Omega Supreme, from old school G1 all the way up to Cyberverse and beyond. And you don't want to miss Empire of Rust, the world's first and only Transformers live play role-playing game podcast. If you love Transformers, there's something for everyone at transmissionspodcast.com.
Discover a world of vintage and modern toys that's more than meets the eye with the Triple Takeover Toycast.
Hosted by toy writers and photographers Toybox Soapbox, 6O, and TF Square 1, this informal and chilled-out series of discussions cover everything from vintage Transformers to Mask, Diaclone, Microman, and more, be it nostalgic or current.
Whether you're a seasoned collector or a casual robot enthusiast, all are welcome.
Triple Takeover Toycast.
We are back here on Toycast episode 170. We are on the road to 200 episodes. We got 30 to go. Josh, the FloorBurger, is famous because he was in Toy Fair magazine twice.
Not just once, but twice.
And
I look silly in both of them. So the first thing I remember, I was really big into Toy Fair magazine. I loved the magazine. I thought it was a lot of fun. And a little trivia fact, some of the writers from Toy Fair magazine work currently, or at least they did work at some point, maybe they're still there, maybe they're not, on Robot Chicken. So
nice, cool.
A lot of the original writers from that switched over, and that's why if you ever read the old school Twisted Toy Fair magazine, there's a similar flavor of using toys. And that was actually one of the big inspirations for those toy comics and stories that I always wanted to write before, was Twisted Toy Fair magazine, because they made it look easy. It's not easy by any means. However, Toy Fair magazine put out, I don't know if I was on their mailing list or something, but they put out a survey, and I remember typing into it, and it was all about Marvel Legends. And in this survey, they're asking about, I think it was Series 7, and the first Hawkeye figure was in that. And admittedly, at the time, I didn't know much about Marvel Comics. I loved comics, but I was a very surface level reader.
Right.
Sorry, hold on one second. I have cats who are demanding attention. Come on now, do your thing. You might want to edit this. I don't know. Come on. There you go. All right. Everybody settle now. So, you still there? Hello?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So I go into the survey and I start typing, and it's about Hawkeye, and the quote was somewhere along the lines of easily the coolest character I know nothing about. He could beat up Legolas any day of the week. And they were at least kind enough in the magazine to frame it like, oh, he's a convert, because I think there was a growing appreciation of nerd culture at the time. It just wasn't there yet. It was still blossoming.
Right, yeah.
And I learned to really like Hawkeye, and I went and did my research on Hawkeye after I got the figure and really appreciated him and thought he was really, really cool. And he's actually one of my favorite cinematic universe characters that I have right now.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, I came off sounding like a massive noob.
Yeah.
So I was quoted in the magazine as saying that. And it was really cool because they responded to me, said, hey, we're using your line, just so you know, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, cool. That's awesome. So that was my first go in the magazine.
Right.
Then I go to, I believe it was the 2004 Wizard World convention in Chicago. And it was, I don't know if it was one of my first, but it was, I definitely was learning about conventions at that point. And I went, and there was a super secret Toy Fair magazine signing. And it was the guys who ran Toy Fair magazine, including the editor, Zach Oat, who has immensely amazing mutton chops. I don't know if he's still out there. Maybe he is. I think he was working for Entertainment Earth the last time I checked.
Right.
One of the nicest, most creative people I've ever met in the toy industry. So just so nice. And so I met him, and he signed a couple things, and I got a picture with the Mego Spider-Man, who was well known in that magazine. And it was really, really exciting for me. And I asked him, I said, hey, you have this spotlight thing in your magazines where people take a picture holding the magazine with celebrities or something like that, and you post it. If I go get my picture with a celebrity who's signing autographs here today, would you put it in? And he's like, yeah, but it has to be Glenn Shaddix. Yeah. And I look over and I see Glenn Shaddix. And if you don't know who Glenn Shaddix is, his two most well-known roles in pop culture were he was Otho in Beetlejuice, and he was Bob in Demolition Man. I almost said Judge Dredd, but Demolition Man.
Demolition Man, yeah.
Almost the same exact character in both movies. But he just played this really good role in both. He was very, very talented. And I go over to him, and I'm talking to him. I said, hey, love your work. Can I get a picture with you? Because the guys over at that magazine who run this convention said they'll publish me in there if I get a picture with you. Now, I'm 20, 21, somewhere around there. I don't know why, but I was very, looking very fresh faced. Like, I had shaved that day. I had just got a really short haircut. So I look like I'm 12. And I go to take the picture of him, but I had to lean over, and it's a very, very awkward lean.
Okay.
Super weird body position for me. So it's not a flattering picture. And I run back and I tell Zach Oat, and he's like, okay, so we traded emails. And so I sent him the picture, and I get published. And then we start corresponding. And he was actually really good. I started asking a lot of questions about how do you get into the magazine industry? What are things you like? And so he was very, very friendly, very communicative. That's what I wanted to say.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That I really looked at how friendly it was. And unfortunately, at that point in college, what he was doing, I was already too far along in college, just like journalism or communications or anything like that. So that's just my one claim to fame. I was in Toy Fair magazine.
That's awesome. That's very cool. Very cool. All right. The Art of Army building in 2005.
So you want to hear how much of a amateur I was at one point in collecting?
Sure.
So when I first got into collecting, I generally shied away from Star Wars. I wasn't too into it when I started, but I loved the Kenner toys. So I explored it, got into it. And I remember feeling that Marvel Legends were too hard to find. Wrestling figures weren't that great. And I was like, with this Return or Revenge of the Sith movie line coming out, this should be a really easy line to collect because there's so much of it out at the time. This is back when there was a Star Wars movie, they used to put toys out. They don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
They do, but not to the extent that they used to. They were wall-to-wall Star Wars.
Yeah.
And so when I started looking around, I started realizing that clone troopers were very plentiful, and that the different color variants of clone troopers were also very plentiful. And that got my, I don't know if you want to call it my ADHD, my OCD, whatever, but I started army building, and it was so much fun. It was so much fun because they were cheap. You could buy a ton of them. I could buy 3 or 4 of them at a time, and it was like not even $20. It was great. And I loved the color variations. There were yellow, orange, red, blue, different paint jobs. There were exclusives I could hunt down, and they seemed to be easy to find. So in my last couple of years of college, I had installed some white Walmart shelves, just the basic rack shelves you could buy. And I went from no Stormtroopers and really not much of a Star Wars collection to, I can't remember the final count, but it was well over 100, 150 Stormtroopers. Or Clone Troopers, rather.
Okay.
And it was just such a fun little thing to do. And I could go anywhere and grab one. And I started labeling some. So, like, I have some that I wrote different numbers or letters on them to kind of signify where they came from, if they came from a friend or if they came from a significant other, whoever. So I had divisions, and they started growing. And that was my first experience with army building. And I didn't really know much about army building prior to that. I knew people did it, but I never did it.
Right, yeah.
And so I had a perfectly, like, I took a ruler and measured them out on these shelves. Like, they were perfectly spaced between each other. And when I graduated college and I had to take it all down, my intention was to always, when I brought it back home, was to reproduce that. Now, I didn't have the same kind of shelves at home, and it was a scale that I didn't really collect a lot of. Like I said, I tried to keep everything in the same scale at like 6-inch, 5-inch, right around there. So they just stayed boxed when I came back from school. But I continued buying for Star Wars with the intention of creating a massive Star Wars display. So I bought Clone Trooper vehicles. I started buying more of the Jedi and more characters. And I actually had a pretty sizable Star Wars collection at one point. And I think the figures were really amazing around 2006, 2007, 2008. If you ever look back, the variety, the articulation, the quantity that you could buy was immense. There was...
Yeah, they had everything out. You could find literally almost everything, yeah.
Expanded universe, you could find comic figures, and they were so unique and so well done. It was great. It was a ton of fun to collect. And I eventually got into army building for Lord of the Rings. And that meant I was buying a lot of orcs or just the generic human army characters. And that was also another line that you could easily collect in multiple forms at the time. So army building became a focus at that point because when I graduated college, I didn't know I was moving. I had this, wonderful home in Long Grove, this large property that, regardless of the time of year, was perfect for taking pictures. And again, I had the intent of writing and taking pictures of massive action figure stories.
Yeah.
But lo and behold, after about a year and a half, news came down. My parents were divorcing, and I had to start packing everything up. So a lot of stuff just stayed in boxes because once they started showing the house, you can't really have an action figure display out. You just can't.
Yeah.
So stuff stayed in boxes for years. When I finally moved, nothing got put out again. Stuff just stayed in boxes. And eventually I sold most of the Star Wars stuff, if not all of it. And then eventually I did pare down the Lord of the Rings a little bit, but I do still have a pretty sizable Lord of the Rings piece. But it did change how I collected, in that when Star Wars Black came out, I started army building for that, which was a little harder because it was a little bit more expensive, obviously.
Right.
But I had a pretty decent Stormtrooper collection for that I eventually did sell some of that off, because if they're selling for $30-$40 a piece, why wouldn't I sell if I have an extra $5,
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't really army build a whole lot anymore. I usually just go with smaller squads, not armies.
Yeah.
So I had a friend who, the guy we mentioned, Froy, before, he said that he would usually army build in 3s, in 4s, in 5s, or 6s.
Mm-hmm.
Because that way you could have a level of symmetry if you want it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I'm at. I don't really have too many figures that are not, like, I think I have 4 or 5 Stormtroopers, 3 Death Troopers, stuff like that. Doesn't really go too crazy, but that was another big phase of just, wow, look at all these Clone Troopers I could buy. And if I find a generic enough looking figure. So there's the Marvel Legends Scourge that came out a couple years ago. I think 2016 he was out.
Okay.
Maybe 2015, 2016.
Right.
He just kind of he looks like a random henchman in gear with a gas mask on. I found him at Five Below. I found, I think, 4 or 5 of them, and they just make for a really good army builder random henchman. So that was kind of one of the last things I ever army builded at the time. Cobra Troopers, now, but those are so hard to find. It's not even funny. Yeah. But that's also going to bring us into 2006 of, this is another big moment. This is the Giant Man and Walmart Legends wave that rocked the Marvel Legends collecting universe.
Mm-hmm.
And in March of 2006, there were 2 things on my mind: graduating and Marvel Legends. And eventually, when I shattered my front tooth the morning of graduation, that was another thing on my mind. But otherwise, it was just graduating and getting out of there and figuring out what my next step was, and finding Marvel Legends before I left. Because my concern about this Walmart exclusive Giant Man wave, when I found out, was that if I didn't find it down there when I got home, my Walmart was awful, and I couldn't go there at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
Which, first world problems, right?
Yeah.
So I remember it was maybe around this time, 2006, maybe February, March 2006. There was a series of pictures that were released, and this is before Twitter. Facebook wasn't really a thing for this yet.
Yeah.
Came out in the forums of a demonstration, like mock-up shipper display, or display shipper, whatever they're called, at a Walmart in, I think, Kansas or Missouri or something like that. And it was basically just those middle-of-the-aisle displayers of this new line of Marvel Legends that was coming out, this Giant Man wave. Right. And it was really, really exciting because the figures that were coming out, some of them have never been made before. Some of them were made before, but they're updated, which was really, really cool. And the Giant Man was just a really, really well done figure. And it just felt so exciting. But when you were looking at this mock-up, it went to this Walmart by accident. It shouldn't have gone there. It was completely by accident.
Right, yeah.
So
those
all the
things sometimes happen, sadly.
Yeah, and all the figures were on mock-ups of card backs and stuff like that. But they had some new guys. Like, they had the Sentry. They had Captain Britain, who hadn't really been out in figure form. They had a really new, really good Thor. They had Kitty Pryde. They had some really, really cool selections. Marvel Legends Warbird. Some amazing figures with this great Giant Man Build-A-Figure. But at the same time, they had the Face-Off series. And the Face-Off series were 2-packs of some really, really unique, very cool characters that got updates. So it was a new Captain America that came with a Baron von Strucker or a Red Skull, depending which variant you got. It had a new Iron Man. It had a new Daredevil. Just so many really cool, really amazing figures that literally would upgrade all of my favorites all in one release. Like, that's basically what happened. Name any of my favorite Marvel characters, they all pretty much got an upgrade in that release.
Cool.
And that night, when I saw those pictures posted, I was actually in that superhero hype forum talking to guys. I'm like, guys, I'm going to Walmart. Wish me luck. So I jump in my car. I'm driving, I think it was like a 2002, 2001 Mercury Sable. And I go and I use my 6-disc CD changer that was in my trunk. I don't know if you remember when that was a thing.
Oh, yes, I do.
Yeah. And I knew that I had Eye of the Tiger in there, and I'm blasting that, racing down this empty college street to get to Walmart. And I get there and there's nothing there.
Oh,
nothing.
No.
Well, because I thought because there was this mock-up that it was going to be at my Walmart for some magical reason. You know, I was totally wrong. It was the dumbest thing I've ever done. And so then over the next couple weeks, I am checking Walmart every night to the point where the employees knew me, they were annoyed by me, or they liked me or whatever, because I always try to be friendly. Like, Yeah,
you should always be friendly.
Yeah.
No matter what it is. Like, whether it's like, if you as a customer are going into a store and you're looking for something, or don't just go in there, shake your fist, where's the new damn, don't do that. Go in there, ask nicely, become friends with the people, because they're just doing their job.
And they don't get paid well enough for it.
Hell no, they don't.
Yeah. And so I started going, and I don't remember exactly when it was, but it just became my regular routine. And my senior year, my last semester of my senior year, I was very, very clever with my schedule. I think there's only 2 classes I actually had to pass to graduate that year, or that semester, and all the other classes were fluff.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I just scheduled things right. I did things well. And so I was working, I was doing it was a really good semester. It was a lot of fun. And like I said, I could go and do this every single night. I'd wake up the next morning, like 8 or 9 in the morning. My first class was 10 or 11. So it was never a problem. This is just what I did.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget the night I got there, and they didn't have the shipper out, but they had, I think, the majority of the wave on the shelf. I don't remember who was missing, but I had most of the Giant Man wave there. And I got it. And the funny thing about the Giant Man wave, compared to a lot of other waves now, is that now you get like someone's entire arm from, the bicep down to the hand. For the Giant Man wave, it was you get the hand with one figure, and then from like the elbow to the bicep with another figure. So they started splitting up all the parts because there were more figures in the wave. There also were I think there are 2 variants in it, but the funny thing is about the variants is that the Sentry figure had a bearded and unbearded version, but they also had 2 color variants of that figure. So there were 4 total Sentry figures. And
oh wow,
it was nuts. It was completely nuts why they had that many, but I loved it because I loved the figure. I loved the bright yellow and blue and the mustard and blue and stuff like that. And it was at this point that anybody who could help, even a girl on my team who would go out of town every so often to a small town with a Walmart. I had people helping me all over the place trying to get these. And it got to the point where I started actually getting more than I needed for my own collection. And I started hooking up people all over the place between my school and back home, because I just had connections to all these small town Walmarts that nobody was buying these at yet.
Yeah.
They were in my town, they're being bought up pretty quickly, but you drive 45 minutes, an hour away, hit a couple Walmarts, and you'd get a ton, and I could resell them and take, I would usually charge like $2-3 per figure. As just like kind of a premium, and at the time that was still cheaper than eBay, so people paid me that. So I'd walk away making $60 off of bringing people a set of these Marvel Legends.
Yeah.
But it was really just such a fun time that I can now tie into another big moment in my life when I graduated college. Now, granted, 2 years later, I go back to get my master's degree, and I should have probably had stayed down there to get my teaching degree, but, that's the reason I'm sitting right here in my seat right now, is that I didn't stay down there.
Yeah.
So that was sort of a nice capstone, or keystone, capstone, I don't know what you want to call it, but like it was a nice finish to college being some of the most important collecting moments of my life.
Right. Yeah.
Meeting people, changing who I was, getting into this new hobby. I finished with one of the biggest and most important Marvel Legend waves that had ever come out. And I still, to this day, think it's probably one of the most important that ever came out.
Cool. Very cool, very cool. And then in late 2006, you found the Food Fighters.
So I think we talked about Food Fighters before.
Oh, yes, we have.
Yeah. And I, in 2006, started feeling a little burnt out by what I called modern toys. This is before DC Universe Classics. This is before Masters of the Universe.
Yeah.
I was just feeling a little burnt out. and I started getting into what I called vintage toys. And what's funny is that what I was viewing as vintage was maybe 15, 16 years old then. Yeah. Now we're getting into things being almost 30 years older, which is a weird feeling. But this is before the prices for a lot of vintage toys took off. You could, in 2006 to 2009, 2010, you could get Turtles for $5. Now, not as much.
No.
So Pixel Dan put out a video about Food Fighters, and it clicked with me that I used to love Food Fighters. I had one as a kid. I had a friend who had the entire series. I loved them. I thought they were a ton of fun. And I decided at that point that I was going to try to find the original set.
Right.
Looked on eBay. Somebody had a set of 10. They were super cheap. Bought them, and I loved them. And I thought they were so much fun because, to me, they look like claymation toys. I think that's really what it is that if you look back at old claymation from the 80s, not only do they have a commercial that uses claymation, but they just look very much like that style that I really liked when I was a kid. So I got them and loved them, and they were a ton of fun. And I thought, oh, okay, cool, I'm done. Then I'm at a convention, and I see a guy has Mean Wiener on his in his booth on card. And that was the first one I ever got. I'm like, hey, that would actually be a really cool piece to just have. That was the first one I got. I don't need the rest. That's fine. Yeah, well, those are famous last words.
Yeah.
So I buy it from Wizard World from a guy named Mark Huckabone, who is known in the toy industry quite a bit. He's a big time buyer and seller. He's been on the Toy Hunter show that was out on Travel Channel for a little while.
Yep.
And really nice guy, really, really cool. Very, very high energy, but very friendly. Just, he's got a good energy about him. But I buy it from him, and then I start kind of looking around, and I come into a couple more. I buy a few more, and then I start buying a few more. Then I eventually, through a lot of work in a couple of years, I have the base set of 10, all carded. I have the 2 smaller vehicles still in the box. And I have one of the variants on the box. And then I started buying the coloring book, the puzzle, the lunchbox. At one point, I think I had one of the biggest and best Food Fighters collections in the Midwest. I later found out that there are guys, and there still is a guy who's got a Food Fighters collection that will rival anybody's.
Yeah.
But I also started army building, so I started buying up loose lots. So I had enough of the pizza character to make a full pizza, which took 8. More of the fries, and then I was starting to get the accessories. And this is a lot of times how collecting goes, is that you start buying up lots because it's cheaper to buy up a lot, get the couple pieces you need, and then sell off the rest. And usually get money back just to get the couple pieces you needed. So in 2016, sometimes when I go through major traumatic moments in my life, I've had a couple times where I start feeling like I need to take some weight off of me. I need to get rid of some stuff, or I need to make some changes in my life. And in 2016, I got really, really sick. I was hospitalized. It was really, really a bad time in my life. And I needed money because I also had medical bills. So this is right when Food Fighters were starting to go up in price in 2016, really just starting, but not bad. So I reached out to Pixel Dan, who I had talked to. I'd met him a couple times, and I said, hey, I'm thinking about selling my carded collection. Would you be interested? And he's like, yeah, what do you think? And so I threw him a number, and the number now is probably half, if not, 1/3 of what I could get for him now, but I don't regret that.
Yeah.
And he bought him off me, and he said, hey, what if we did a video out of this? So there is a Pixel Dan video. If you look up Pixel Dan and Food Fighters, you'll see the video where he bought up my carded collection and everything that goes with it. And it was pretty awesome. And I also started selling off my extra loose figures, which, again, Pixel Dan bought more of those. And Das also bought a bunch. He almost bought, I think, almost the entire set off of me.
Very cool.
And I still have a full set. I have a couple extras. And like I mentioned, I have the play set. And it's one of the cornerstones of my collection. It would probably be one of the main pieces of my collection I would not sell if I ever had to sell everything.
Right.
So that was a really fun little unique part of my that kicked off a lot of major events in my life of meeting people, making connections, really exploring a lot of things. I learned that food fighters were actually probably going to be aliens if they ever had any sort of content or media that came out with them. They were supposed to be like little aliens or something.
Mm-hmm.
There was more meant to be out there, and there's still a lot of secrets that people don't want to trade because the person who owns the trademark or the copyright right now doesn't want that information getting out for whatever reason. I don't know.
Yeah.
There was some drama there with some of the things that occurred. But moving right along,
well, we will most definitely, because I need to go back and rewatch that video, but I will probably most definitely embed the video that Josh is talking about where Pixel Dan bought his food fighters in the post on geekcastradio.com. Moving right along, we are getting to the totally tubular traveling toys of 2007.
So I took one of my first major vacations as an adult, without parents, without school, just me choosing to take a vacation in 2007.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of a big moment in my life because it was actually the first time I flew by myself. That was a big thing.
Really?
And yeah.
That was the first time. 2007, you were 30 years old?
No, I was
20. 25?
Right around there, yeah.
Yeah. So that's funny you say that because at that point I had been flying since I was 5 years old in 1985.
Well, small little bit of background on that is, so my first vacation, my first flight, I was 7 years old, and then I took 2 other flights after that, but my family didn't travel a lot. And we didn't really go a lot of places. My last vacation that I flew somewhere for until this one was 10 years earlier. So I actually hadn't, outside of two school trips, let me rephrase that, 2 school trips, I hadn't flown for a vacation in 10 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So the 2 trips I took were not vacations. They were related to cheerleading. And
hey, that's a vacation.
One day we'll have a non-toy talk, and I'll tell you about those 2 trips.
That can go on Geekcast Radio, the flagship show, folks.
Yeah, we'll see about that.
Yeah.
So
anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and so this was one of my first trips. It was really exciting, and I flew, and it was we were staying around the Orlando area, and I won't go into too much detail about it, but I was really excited for the new Transformers movie, and I really liked the look at the time of some of these new Transformers, and I found a Bumblebee when I was shopping, and I bought it, and I was like, hey, this is really cool. This is really exciting. I love the figure and kind of took it along with me. Didn't do too much with it. I didn't take any pictures of it, but I had it with me for that trip. And I got back, and it was my first. I don't know if it was my first, but it was definitely one of my first toys I remember getting on vacation and traveling with. I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. So 2 years later, I planned another trip back to Orlando and Disney. And I brought with me these little Pokemon that I like to travel with, Bulbasaur and Ivysaur. They're small, they're easy to travel with, they're discreet. You can have them in your bag, take them out, take a picture, put them back in your bag, and go about your day. So people had told me that there's like something called like a flat Stanley or something where when you're traveling, you just take a picture of this little figurine in a unique area, and then you start collecting pictures of the travels of this figurine. And it's actually a very popular thing that I found out that people do. And on that trip, go to Walmart. 2 years later, guess what was hitting theaters that summer again?
Transformers.
The second
Fallen. Yep.
Yeah. So I got, and maybe Skids, I think is his name. He's a silver Transformer, and he's got maybe 30 seconds of screen time in the movie. But I got that, and it was really cool. So I have these 2 figures now that I've gotten there, and it was pretty much from there that I started realizing with the Pokemon and everything is that I really liked traveling with toys and taking pictures of them in new places because it was just really fun. And let's see. So 2009, did I take another trip after that? I can't. I was at my honeymoon in 2013. So I brought several figures out to our resorts, a lot of beach-related figures out to the resort, and that was really cool. I have this Michelangelo figure from the Sewer Spitters line where he's in sort of a tourist outfit. So he's got a Hawaiian shirt on, a lei,
Nice.
a straw hat. He just is like a perfect figure to travel to tropical locations. So he started coming with. And when I got the Michael Knight figure, these became my traveling figures, and they rotate.
Yeah.
So starting in 2007, I get this first Bumblebee figure that I was like, hey, I like having this. Part of collecting now became I'm getting toys and I'm remembering where I got them from. So every trip, something goes with me. When I went to Boston, I brought a Doctor Who figure with me. When I went to our honeymoon, it was all these tropical themed figures and a couple other Pokemon. When I would go to Disney and other times, I would bring David Hasselhoff. So in 2016, David Hasselhoff came with me, and that was a ton of fun. I'll have to send you some pictures of that later. And so now that's my kind of regular thing. Whenever I travel, something comes with me for an adventure, and I think it's an extension of that fellowship from before, where I had this group of figures that traveled with me.
Yep.
I think it's an extension of that a little bit.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
But I've had a lot of funny moments with it because I've had to go through security with them, and somebody opens up the bag and they're like, "What is this?" And I'm like, "I'm a photographer. I don't know what to tell you. I don't know why I have a bunch of toys in my."
Yeah, it's kind of like Jeff Dunham when he goes through airport security. They open it up and Walter's there and shut the damn door. You know.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of thing because airport security is always wary of because they expect nothing but clothes and other things to be in there. They don't expect toys to be in a suitcase. But yeah.
And it there is a little bit of fear in there because I don't want to lose anything, and I think that's one of the reasons why I have so many David Hasselhoffs is that I remember I wish I wrote down, I have at least 4 right now of the same Kenner Michael Knight figure, and I wish I could identify one. My mom got me one. I got myself an extra. I had my first one that I got. And I liked having more because in case I ever lost them on a trip, I'd have extra. But like now I'm so attached to the Michael Knight figures that I'm more nervous about even bringing the extras on the trip with me. So that's always a nerve-wracking piece of if somebody steals my bag or if I lose my bag, that they're gone. So now I'm being a little bit more particular about when I travel, what goes with me, how it goes with me. Because one time, I can't remember, I think it was on my honeymoon or it was when we went back to Punta Cana a couple of years ago, I was taking pictures of figures in the sand. And sand is actually sometimes really kind of nice to take pictures of figures in because you can put their feet in the sand and they hold the pose pretty well. And wet sand works really, really well for this. Except when you don't know that the waves are now getting a little bit more fierce. So there was one time I had a little group picture of all these figures set up. The waves came in, and I'm trying to take a picture. My wife's sitting there like, can we just go get a drink or go do something else? And the wave comes up and grabs them and starts dragging them back towards the ocean. I'm like, no! And I run, and I'm able to recover everything. But I will say the biggest fear of traveling figures for me is losing them. So now sometimes when I go on trips, it's not so much what I bring with me, it's what I take back. So I have a Marvel Legends Cable figure I got in Vegas because Vegas is about excess and 90s characters like Cable were about excess, and it just kind of worked. So that all kind of started in 2007 with Disney and doing stuff there.
Very cool, very cool. And then it's off to 2008 with the style of Mark and the speed of Josh on epic toy hunts.
So my buddy Mark, I've mentioned a lot. He and I really started hanging out a lot in 2007, 2008, and really getting into toy hunting. And I would go visit him or he would visit me. And it became very apparent to me very quickly that when it comes to hunting, we have very similar instincts. I think part of it is that he learned it from me, but he also took what he learned from me, because he got into collecting after I did,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of it was because of me.
Right.
And I think he learned some of that stuff from me, and then he has perfected that style on his own, and he's gotten his own style now that he could probably teach other people. He's kind of a Jedi master now. But 2008 and 2009 and 2010 and even up until this very day, put the two of us in a car, give us some time to go toy hunt. We know what to do. We know that we're going to drive to the next store. We're going to park. There's no lollygagging in the car. You're out of the car.
Yep.
You're into the store. And when we get in, we know how to zoom and hunt all the way to the toy section. We know where we go first. We do our first loop. We always do a double back. We always check again, because usually you always find something on the second go around. And we just have that very strong. We don't lollygag. Like, we move very fast.
Yeah. Like, the whole point, like, again, so example I can give you for myself. Was it Bullseye? Yeah, I think it was. So a couple of years ago, forget when, but a number of years ago, Funko released flocked Target ad icon Bullseye dog. It was me and like 8 other people waiting outside Target to, for them to open the doors. They opened the doors. I don't look at anything at the beginning. I don't look at anything in the registers. I don't look at anything anywhere. I'm like beelining to the electronics department. I just want one. I don't want I'm not a scalp. Scalping is wrong, folks. Don't scalp shit. That kind of thing. But I just wanted one of those figures, and I was able to get one, fairly decently. But like, that's that streamline, not multitasking. It's what the hell is it called? It's like it's a one-liner. It's like, you have from point A to point B kind of thing, and nothing is going to distract you from it.
Yeah, and I think just he and I having that unspoken style that when I go visit him now, because he lives in about 45 minutes southwest of Orlando right now in a smaller town. I don't know if it's a smaller town, but it's a little bit more of a developing rural area. So very close to Bloomington Normal, where I went to school, is that it's developing. It's getting bigger. There's more stores. There's more traffic. But we have a tendency now when I go down there that we go to Disney first thing in the morning. So we get up at like 5:30 in the morning. We're out the door by 6, and we're giving ourselves enough time to go check a Walmart on the way up there. We might be half asleep, but we still know as soon as we get down there, boom, 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 check it, back in the car, we're gone if there's nothing to buy. And it's one of those really fun extensions of that earlier toy hunt I was talking about, of you have these big epic moments that now are just really part of a skill and a style. So let's keep going. I'm going to keep pushing forward, pushing the accelerator down, because we're getting into the last 10 years now. So when my wife and I first moved into our first house, we bought a house a little townhouse, wonderful little place, great starter home for the both of us. And it was in Gurnee, in which I think you were living in the area, maybe 5 minutes from us at the time.
Well, when did you buy that house?
2012.
I was not in Gurnee until 2018, so it took me 6 years.
Oh, okay. Well, we were there in 2018.
Right. Yeah. But I was in 2012.
Yeah. So this particular model of home in this neighborhood had a smaller, it depended on if it was remodeled or how it was designed. Some people use it as a bedroom. Some people use it as an office. Some people use it as a bonus storage room. Some people took the wall down and just widened the entire area. But it was this little bonus space that we're using for storage. But I started slowly but surely carving out what we called the man cave. What it would eventually become was simply where my computer desk was, a couch, a TV, and shelves of most of my toys. And then a lot of boxes, tons of boxes. And then later during quarantine, that became my classroom. So the room took a long time to build. I had shelves. I had bookshelves that eventually just weren't doing the job, so I sold them, and I made my own shelving from unfinished wood from Menards or something like that, unfinished shelving. And it really took a long time, and it evolved from some basic unmatching bookshelves to putting in some cheaper unfinished bookshelves and really developing it further. And it literally looked like a hoarder's nightmare most of the time. It was not a clean room. It just wasn't coming together very quickly. There wasn't a lot of space. My first 3 years living in that home, I was so busy. I was driving almost 2.5 hours a day for work. Round trip was about 2.5 hours. 2 hours on a good day, 2.5 on a bad day.
Wow.
And it just, I never gave myself the time or the dedication or focus to turn it into something functional and wonderful and enjoyable. And the whole time we were there, so we moved in 2020. The whole time I was there, it took until lockdown, that in the first 2 or 3 weeks of lockdown, where I didn't know if I was going back to school, I actually didn't have to work at the time. We used emergency days. That I decided I was finally going to just make the display. I was going to make the room. I was going to put everything up. I was going to make it what I wanted it to be with the space I had. And I finally did it. And I have YouTube videos of it I can share with you of the completed man cave at the time. And it wasn't the greatest room. It was not, again, I look at it now, I'm like, it wasn't clean. It wasn't nice. It was very cluttered. It was messy, but it was what I had. And then when we moved, we picked a house that had a spare room that we called the blue room because it's painted blue. And I was like, I'm turning this into my new collection room. This is what I wanted the man cave to always be. Now, the man cave was supposed to be when I had guys over, that's where we'd go hang out because there was a couch up there, TV, video games, all that stuff. That was supposed to be the room. The problem with it is that it was right next to our bed. We didn't have a bedroom. It was a lofted space in the townhome. And the challenge would be, hey, if Mike, you came over, we'd be hanging out, playing video games late at night. My wife would be just behind the wall trying to sleep.
Yeah, that's not so. Yeah, that's kind of like how now where I'm gonna eventually have my stuff set up in my bedroom. So originally I had my bed up against the wall where it's the wall where I'm now sitting, where my computer is. I switched that to have that over by where my actual neighbor is, and on that wall that faces this one to the living room, that's where I'm going to, mount my TV, because I would rather mount it on an inside wall than a neighbor wall. And if the TV's too loud, it might affect the neighbor. So it's the same thing with your wife. If the bedroom is right there and you're, up playing Grand Theft Auto 4 and Nico is, doing whatever Nico does in Grand Theft Auto 4, that's sound. And plus, if it's two or more, guys or girls or whatever hanging out and whatever else, you're going to talk, you're going to laugh, and that other person is not going to be able to sleep. And
So.
And
it was a very open floor plan, so there wasn't a lot of space to hide. So when we got this new place with the bar that we have down in the basement, now I can go play video games and hang out down there. The toy room is just my toy room. The blue room is that. And I went and bought nicer shelves and I started setting everything up. And the room is still in flux. We're waiting to get new floors put in. So there's a lot of stuff that I just like, there's no reason to touch this, because if we get new flooring put in, I have to take it all out. I have to take out the entire bottom shelf.
Yeah.
And I'm not looking forward to that. And I might even have to take more than just the bottom shelf out so they can put flooring in.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, it's going to be a nightmare. It's going to be a crazy piece. But when that's done, I can finally the floor becomes a display space. So it's going to really be able to stretch all that out. And the blue room is eventually going to become a very proper collecting space where stuff is displayed properly. There's not a bunch of junk on the floor and just like empty boxes, and it'll be a lot nicer. But the man cave, what it was when we got it in 2012, was supposed to be my dream space that I always wanted. And it's just funny that it took a worldwide pandemic to make that happen.
Well, a lot of things happened because of, or didn't happen because of the pandemic, and it's a strange time we live in. So, also in 2012, you were collecting the TMNT toy line.
Yeah, and that was the 2012 Nickelodeon toy line, and I remember being very skeptical. So, I was very much a skeptic of the new Ninja Turtles because there was a movie, a 2007 movie that came out that I liked but wasn't received as well as it could have been. The toy line was pretty good, but again, not received as well as it could have been.
Yep.
Then there was the 2003 or so Turtle line that I liked, but it just didn't gel with me.
The show was better than the toys.
Yeah, and well, the toys weren't terrible. I look back at a lot of them.
No, they weren't terrible, but I'm saying, like, comparing the media, the show was better than the toy. Like, so. There were pluses and minuses to it. I only got the 4 main turtles. I didn't get anybody else from it. Yep.
Then before that, there was the Next Mutation line, which was one of the rare times. Well,
stop. Go forward in time. We're not talking about Next Mutation.
Hold on. Well, Next Mutation, the toy line was better than the show. If you look back at it, it was better than the show.
Yeah.
And then before that was the original Playmates line.
Obviously, the original Playmates line. So going back to 2012.
Yeah. 2012, I was like, ooh, I'm a little skeptical of this. I'm not feeling it. It looks just too different. Yeah. When I got those 4 first turtles and saw how posable they were, how well sculpted they were, how well they held their weapons, I was sold. I thought this was one of the coolest toy lines that had come out. It was affordable. The vehicles were really, really cool. They're very functional. I didn't like the first Turtle Van-ish vehicle, the Shell Razor.
Yep.
But then they came out with a Turtle Van that was a mix between the original cartoon Turtle Van and the van, the Volvo van that was driven in the first movie.
Yep.
And the playset is amazing. There just was so much imagination and thought put into this overall line that I felt that it was one of the most fun times to collect turtles and collect figures in general, because when they finally caught up with demand and there were a ton of toys out there, there wasn't a time where I probably wasn't buying something from it. They were all very fun, all very cool. The accessories were amazing. You just didn't see stuff like that at the time, and it felt like it felt like the 80s again. It felt like a proper toy aisle in that section. I still remember going to Toys R Us and seeing, wow, they have a lot of space here. This feels like old school Turtles, and that was great.
Yeah,
and and I'm really looking forward to figuring out where to put the 5-foot playset that I have somewhere.
Yeah.
But
yeah. That 2012 TMNT toy line and that show, I need to go back to that show. I watched like the first 3.5 seasons of it. I watched up until the point where Jason Biggs got replaced by Seth Green, and I think I've only seen like the first 2 or 3 episodes from season 3. That show was awesome. I loved watching that show because it was a different version of the turtle, obviously different style, different whatever, but it was so fun. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and it just had a nice energy to it, and most people liked it. There were a couple figures that just weren't as good as they could have been, but for the most part, it was exciting. And actually, I have one of my favorite toys from that of all time is a remote control vehicle that you could put 2 figures on. And I will always say, if you're going to do a branded remote control vehicle for a toy line, for an action figure line, you need to have those figures fit in the vehicle, whatever it is. So, for instance, right now there's a Mattel Jurassic Park, I think it's an Explorer or a Jeep or some sort of vehicle that you could fit the current Jurassic Park toys in. I was like, that's amazing. That's what you should do. There's a Buzz Lightyear movie remote control toy that you can fit 3 of the toys in. And this Ninja Turtle sort of, it's like a go-kart or like some sort of buggy or something like that. Again, a very cool toy that they fit in, and that's what I like about
a functional vehicle. Put the toy in. I don't want to drive that toy. Give me a controller so that I can move that toy where it needs to go, and it's a lot more fun. So yeah, it was just very, very, very well done. So another thing right around 2012 was my discovery of something that people had already known a lot about, but that was the Kane County Toy Show.
Right. So this is from 2012 to today and ongoing toy shows, and you found Kane County.
Yep. So I remember there was a point in my life where I'm going to go out to this toy show. I think this was maybe 2008. I'm going to drive out and go see it. And it was a weird day, and I ended up not going, and I regretted it. And kind of left it in the back of my mind. But when I started listening to Dave and Duvall on their podcasts, they would talk about going to Kane out all the time. I'm like, I know Kane County. I used to go out there all the time. I know all about it. And so Mark and I went in 2012 and checked it out, and it was amazing. And Mark and I had gone to so many conventions together that we had our style of exploring conventions down, that we created a grid. We took notes. We knew where stuff was. We had our shopping list, and we didn't spend a lot of, we didn't waste each other's time in a lot of booths. We generally went in. I knew what he was looking for. I knew what he knew what I was looking for. So it was a lot more efficient. And I loved my first experience shopping there. And then I was talking to the guy who owns Dreamland Comics here in Libertyville, and he says he runs a booth out there. And I said, I'm looking to sell some stuff. I need some extra money. And he offered to share his booth with me, and he gave me a table. So after only shopping there, I think for one or two shows, and this is where I found some of my current carded Ninja Turtle figures that I have right now, where I got a bunch of those for really cheap, like $5. The comic shop owner, Charlie, who said, hey, sell with me. So this was another great education in learning how to sell, because this guy grew up selling at flea markets, and he knew the style and the methods and the skill behind it. And I learned a lot about selling from him, but I also did really well. I made a lot of money at this first show, and I kind of got addicted to it. So the booth went from just one little table to eventually having 3 tables or 4 tables. And then my wife would help me, or my stepdad and my mom would come and help me, or Mark would come and help me. And it was a great way to be at the show and explore and experience the show, but also make money off of it, which is kind of one of those big things.
Right. Yeah.
So I did that for a couple of years, and, I was trying to buy stuff to sell. I was trying to buy inventory to flip, and that'll get us to a later bullet point coming up. But I get exhausted very quickly from the buying and selling grind, going out, buying stuff to resell. Modern toys, I will tell you my experience with buying modern toys in retail to try to resell at these shows, rarely ever go. Rarely get money for them. So usually end up buying a bunch of stuff, hoping to sell it at the show. Then I have to go and return it anyway.
Right, yeah.
Service desk at Target. Or like, what is a tag that says $45 on it? I'm like, oh, take that off, please. That's not supposed to be on there. That was an accident. So I kind of got to the point of being burnt out to sell stuff. Now, I still do and will sell. I probably am going to be purging a lot of stuff this year, but I generally don't like going out buying stuff to sell unless it's a complete coincidence that I'm at a garage sale or flea market or thrift store and there's a huge box of toys to sell. That
right,
is $10 for this giant box. I'm not checking Facebook to go find stuff to resell anymore. It's just too exhausting.
Yeah.
But generally with these shows, the best part about them for me as a collector was networking and meeting new people and meeting store owners and meeting people who are regular dealers and making friendships. And now there are people who are there is this really nice guy named Nick out of Chicago who would buy from me frequently, and just a really friendly, charismatic guy. I think he's like a track coach in Chicago, and he does a really good program out there. I see him at every show now, and we know each other, and we talk, and we catch up. We see each other twice a year for about 20 minutes. That's it. But there's a lot of people like that you meet at these shows that you make friendships with, and that's been being around those dealers and those people and seeing them has actually become the best part about it. It's not even the toys. Being around the toys is a ton of fun, but being around all of these people I see on a semi-regular basis is great.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, like you said, networking and all that good stuff. And that's, again, going back to like podcasting, same thing. One of the reasons why I did not want our comic book podcast, The Pull Bag, to just be us discussing or reviewing or talking about comics. I wanted it to be more, and that's why the Pull Bag comic origins and comic reading started. And then I expanded it to toys, to cartoons, to podcast, other things, where I'm having, instead of reviewing every piece of media I've ever watched on a show, or instead of doing a review show of, say, GoBots or whatever, like, I love doing the whole camaraderie thing of bringing people on to ToyCast to ask them the 42 questions, or Tooncast for the cartoons, or the, so yeah, you're right. Absolutely. Same thing. It's not always about, yes, you want figures and whatever else, but you're right. The buying and selling aspect of toys is exhausting.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I'm still planning on going this April, and still planning to go this October if I can. And it's just become such a nice little tradition. And now I'm mostly just helping out with Mike Tomaso's booth and, his shop. And, he's in kind of repayment. He lets me have one table worth of space, which is always great. I just don't know what I'm bringing out this year. I still have to plan for that. And that's going to be a whole nother stressful moment. But let's go ahead and move on.
All right, up next, we are talking about 2014 and the 5-year quest for TMNT figures from that 1990 Christmas episode we had over on Geekcast Radio.
So this will be relatively brief. We've talked about this a bunch of times, but a couple of years ago, I discovered a family video of a 1990 Christmas where I got Space Cadet Raph, Samurai Leo, Undercover Don, and I think it's Sewer Surfer Mike and Storage Shell Don. And my brothers and I got those for Christmas. And there was a toy show I was at where I got the Michelangelo for $5. Price tag is still on there. It was a $5 box figure. I said, cool, I'm going to buy it. And I should have bought the entire lot that was sitting there because I'd be sitting on a small fortune at this point.
Yeah, you should have.
But the hindsight being 2020, obviously. So what I decided to do at that point was, because that's one of the few Christmases I can remember what I got from, because there's video evidence of it, I was going to go buy the 5 figures we got that Christmas. And I wanted them carded. And so pretty much it just, I didn't want to get anything from eBay because prices varied so much. So I started slowly but surely just hunting down those 5 figures. And I just decided it wasn't urgent. It wasn't a make it or break it type of thing. But I just started slowly but surely finding them at shows and getting them for cheap. And I like doing that stuff now where I have a theme behind collecting. And I think that's where I'm probably going to go as long as I'm a collector moving forward, is it's got to have a story behind it. It's got to have meaning behind it. It's not just, oh, I just want this next Marvel Legend figure. Is what is the connection I have to it? And those are the questions. So I've actually been out at stores and have found stuff. Oh, this is really cool. But I start asking myself, what is the connection I have to it? And if I don't have it, it gets put away.
Yeah, exactly.
And
that's like me currently, again, sorry to interrupt you, but if I don't have a connection to a character, I'm going to most likely get rid of it.
Well, it's not even a connection to the character for the most part. It's also a connection, like if it's a vintage toy or modern toy, that's also a big part of it. So, I mean, which for me right now, because I've been able to semi-reclaim a lot of what I've collected when I was a kid or had a piece of it, there's not a lot left that I'm feeling I'm hunting for. So it's actually making it more fun because I'm not thinking I need to buy everything. It's just, let's just try to find something unique and cool that I have a connection to. And it makes hunting a little bit more focused. It's not as stressful. It's not as random and bizarre. So great example is that a buddy of mine, Brian, he lives in Lake Zurich.
he's got an amazing basement display, and he bought a box of stuff off me a couple of years ago before I changed my collecting habits. And he actually has a Kenner Terminator 2 figure of mine sitting in his display that I recognize because it's missing its arm from the elbow down. And I saw it, and I was like, at first I was like, oh, I remember having a figure missing its arm like that. Didn't think it was mine. I pick it up, I take a closer look, and it's got sticky tack on it. Okay. And I always put sticky tack on my toys growing up because it was the easiest accessory to do anything you wanted with. And it still had sticky tack in its crevices from when I was a kid.
Oh, wow.
And so I was like, oh, wow, that's one of mine. He's like, yeah, most likely is. He's like, I kept it because it was missing the arm and it looked cool because it was battle damage. And I asked him later on, I said, I actually kind of want that. I kind of want that. Like, that was mine when I was a kid and it's kind of meaningful to me. And so I made him an offer of like to say, hey, I'll trade you this really cool Terminator 2 package figure that I have. Like, I'll trade it to you, just to make it fair. And he actually said, I know that right now you're switching to a lot of stuff that's more meaningful to you, that has a good story behind it. So he's like, you can just have it and that's fine. And I was really appreciative of that. But, wow. But that sort of moment of saying, hey, I'm going to collect these 5 figures, not because I just want the series or because I want the figures, is because they have like I look at them all the time when I'm in here. They're up above my closet door that I face at my computer. It's more of, hey, they just have this phenomenal story behind them, and I can look at it, and I don't need to watch the video. I can tell you the story behind how important these were when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And so that's where I'm switching to with a lot of my collecting, and so it's a lot more fun, but that's why that's important. So let's go ahead. We're going to jump to one of the craziest experiences I ever had.
So the 2015 estate sale.
Okay. So this is in the heat of when I was trying to become a toy dealer. Okay. I was getting to be pretty well known as a good dealer, as a really nice, pleasant guy, offering people good deals and stuff like that. So Jason Duvall shoots me a message one evening and says, hey, there's this really great estate sale right by you. And in the estate sale, there's, let's just say it's 10 carded original Kenner Star Wars figures.
Okay.
And a bunch of other really cool stuff. And he's like, you should go to it. And I'm like, I mean, it's cool, but it's nothing I need. And he said, no, look at all the cool stuff in there. Like, why don't you just try going? And he recommended, if you're going to go, if it's opening at, let's say it was 7, you need to be there at 4.
Yeah.
And it just so happened my wife was working an overnight camping trip through her job with she ran a summer camp, and they finished a session of summer camp with an overnighter. And I pretty much had nothing to do. And I was like, okay, let's go and do that. So I get up at 3 a.m. I drive out to Vernon Hills, and it was a nice little neighborhood. And I pull up to the house, and I'm looking. I'm like, okay, this is cool. It's 4 a.m. It's dark. I'm feeling a little weird. And I'm sitting there, and this guy comes up to my window. He knocks on my window, and I open it up, and I'm like, I'm thinking it's the homeowner. I'm thinking it's security. I'm thinking it's a crackhead. I don't know who the hell this guy is. And he said, oh, okay. So, hey, so you're here second. So what's your name? And I'm going to put you on the list that you're the second one here. And I was like, oh, okay. Wow. And I'm like writing my name on the list. I'm like, oh, do you run the estate sale? He's like, no, I was the first one here. I'm like, wait, why do I have to respect your list that you were the first one here? And he said, well, that's just the way these things go. So, if you don't want to respect that, I'll tell the guys who run it that, you're trying to cut me. And I'm like, okay, this is a bit intense, but sure, whatever. So eventually when people start showing up, we get out of our cars and we're waiting in line up in front of the house. And we're talking, and I start asking, and I start trying to get a sense of what everybody's after. The guy ahead of me just wants the Star Wars figures.
Oh boy.
I would have considered those if I could get my hands on them and if the price was right. I wasn't going to drop a ton of money on them.
Right.
But I knew that there was in one of the pictures, and I have it down in the basement right now, a wooden like toy chest. It's like a cube. It's about 2 by 2 by 2, and it has a lid that you can clip off. And it was a Ninja Turtle toy chest. And in the picture I saw, it had the turtle blimp. It had a couple other things. So that's what I was that was what I was going for. So what I told the other guys in line was, hey guys, he only wants the Star Wars figures. He's being kind of a jerk. The other stuff, if I go and grab that box, I don't mind, I'm second in line. I'll grab the box to make sure he doesn't get it because he's probably going to go for the Star Wars figures. We can go and take the box. I'll dig through what I want. If you guys want some stuff out of it later, that's fine. I'll take what I want. You guys can take what you want. So we're all waiting in line. I watched this guy go over to one of the organizers for the estate sale, and he does, and I swear I saw him do this. The $20 in the palm handshake trick.
Oh, Jesus, yes.
So he had some amount of money in his hand. I couldn't see what it was. Shakes hand with the guy. I see them whisper to each other. And the funny thing about this is that they open the door and they say, everybody's got to take their shoes off. So all these adult men who are the first 10 people in line, we go in, we have to step up into the door. We all take our shoes off. And the guy in front of me starts running for the basement where the toys are. And I'm right behind him. And I'm like, all right, if he's going to run, I'm going to run. I don't care about beating him. I'm just going to put some pressure on him because I'm not getting these figures. He gets down there. We get down there at the same time. I'm 2 steps behind him. He goes to the table where the 10 figures are, and he waves his hand over, and he says, I'm taking all of them. And there was already somebody standing next to the table, not by any of the other toys. And there was some other valuable stuff down there.
Yeah.
So the guy he paid off was standing down there to make sure he got him.
Oh.
And so I grab the turtle box. I grab a couple other things, and I go and I check out, and I tell the other guys, including this one guy who's a buddy of mine now, Eric, hey, I'm going to go out. I'm going to look through this. I'm going to pick out what I want. And then, if you guys want some other stuff, that's fine. So we go out there, and we just kind of dump the box out and right next to my car. And guys start digging through stuff, and they're like, oh, what about this? What about this? And I just want to make my money back. I made my money back selling stuff out of that box. I broke even just by showing up. And I went home with this box and a couple of vehicles and some great accessories. And I sold even more stuff out of there. I actually ended up selling probably about $200 worth of stuff out of that. So, and I'm still friends with the one guy from the estate sale now. He's a really good dude. And it just, I have that one crazy story. But that's the other reason why I hate doing the hustle of trying to go to find product to sell.
Yeah. And for me, it's not even about finding product to sell. It's about finding the things that I want. So you've talked in this podcast episode, and we've talked about this on the show for the last X number of years now, the toy hunt. I am done hunting. I know what I want, and I would much rather sit here in comfort in my apartment, on my computer, ordering it on whatever website I have to order it on, so I know I'm guaranteed to get it once I've purchased it.
Yeah.
At 43 years old now, I have no interest. Recently, this is recent because I'll probably release this episode soon, probably this week. This past weekend or a couple weekends ago, there was this Funko warehouse thing happening in Buckeye, Arizona, where the Funko warehouse was having this sale and all these, and there's video out there. I know Gasselcast and a few other people have it, about the security guard telling the people in line, back up, do this, do that, and people shoving each other and this, that, and the other thing. And the same thing, like I said earlier in the podcast now, where I was going after that bullseye. Yes, I was running through Target to get to the electronics department, but I was not pushing people out of my way or anything like that. I was just trying to be the first one there. I ended up being the second one there, but I still got what I wanted to get. But I didn't do stupid shit, didn't do inconsiderate, stupid shit that might get me in trouble with security or the police or whatever. And it's like, they're just toys. Get the fuck over it, please. Like, it's not the end of it's not even first world problems to me. If you're going to be a child and not, like, that's why I'm like, hunting, screw that. I don't care anymore. I would rather sit here. If I can get it online, I can get it online. If I can't get it online, oh well, I'll have to miss out. That's okay. I don't, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it's just one of those things where it's so frustrating to just enjoy the hobby of going to a store because and not everyone is like this. Not everyone is like those idiots and not much happened at the Funko thing in Arizona, but a few things. But it's like, I would say 75% of the toy collecting community are sane, respectable kind of. It's just that other 25% that just make it horrible for the rest of us because they want to be babies about it. If they don't get it, they don't get it. It's like, sorry about your luck. I don't know, man. It just,
yeah.
It's just one of those things that just makes me so mad, and it makes me to the point where, like I said, I'm too goddamn old to hunt for a toy. If I can get it on Funko's website or my buddy Wes's website, poppingofftoys.com or eBay or Macari or whatever, like, I would rather know that I have the thing versus having to dig through a shelf in a store and the employee may or may not even know what the hell I'm looking. You know what I mean? Like, I'm over hunting at this point in my life. But back then, at this awesome estate sale and whatever else, it must have been really cool.
Yeah, and I think where I'm entering now in my life is that I would rather hunt knowing that I don't have anything to lose and it's just more fun. Going to a flea market or going to an antique mall or something like that, just a little bit over time, I think is just to see what they have, see what I can find, and not trying to hunt something. It's more about, are you looking for the experience? Or are you looking for the desire for something? And I'm more of wanting to shift to looking for just the experience and just see what turns up, see what magical thing shows up when I randomly check something every now and then. I'm not really there for the stress of collecting anymore because it's not worth it, and it makes a lot of people angry, and they put YouTube shows up that are all about being angry. So let's go ahead and move on. Speaking of questing for things and trying to find things. So 2015 was a big year because it was the year of the Megazords for me. Yep. It was the year where a lot of things came together, and I finalized getting the original Power Rangers, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the Thunder Megazord, getting the Tiger Zord. I managed a lot to finish all of those in the same year, and it wasn't because I was trying. It just, opportunity pops up, took it, got it. So as a kid, the only Zord I had was the Dragon Zord. And the Dragon Zord by itself is an amazing toy and it's an amazing piece, but it's designed to go with the Megazord. But that was very hard to find, and I never got it as a kid. But I did get the Thunder Megazord, but I never got the White Tiger Zord. So it's really funny that in the two Power Rangers iterations that I was really a big fan of, I had the Zord that belonged to Tommy in the first series, which was the Dragon Zord, but I didn't have the main Megazord. Right. Then later on, I get the Thunder Zord, which is, the 5 crazy ones, but I didn't get the Zord the White Zord, the Tiger Zord.
The Tiger Zord, yeah.
Belonged to Tommy. So it was like kind of an inverse situation. And I can't remember where I got the White Tiger Zord. I think I got it at a flea market or at a toy show or something. It was missing a couple parts, and I got the parts through a lot of toys that I bought, and I was able to complete them. And the same goes with the Megazord, is that the guy Charlie, who runs Dreamland, got it in a lot of toys. He offered me a good deal on it, and I said, I got to take it because I've never had it. So I finally got it almost 20 years later. I almost got it. Finally finished. Took me about 20 years to finally get that. So I have what I feel is as complete, if not the most complete for me, Power Rangers collection that has not only a ton of stuff that I had originally when I was a kid, but also some stuff that I was able to get later on. But it was just funny that it took me almost 20 years. We're talking about a 20-year show, but it took me 20 years to finally get if not 21 years, to finally get the completed Megazord. So not much to mention about that. Just a kind of a big moment of coming full circle from when I was a kid of never being able to get that original Megazord.
Yeah.
Wanting it so badly and only playing with it with a friend of mine maybe twice.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Yeah, so I never had the original Megazord or the Dragon Zord or anything like that, but in 1995, when the movie came out, there's a picture of me somewhere, I forget where it is, but there's a picture of me where I'm holding something in my hand and I'm looking at it. I'm not looking at the camera because I was looking at the toy. In 1995, I was 15 years old. Power Rangers was still a big thing. As you mentioned, Tommy. Oh, God, Jason David Frank, I hope you're resting well up there, sir. God damn it. But, you know, it was all about Tommy and the White Ranger and the Tiger Zord, like you said. But then the movie hits, and we have the Ninja Falcon Zord. And this picture is me holding the Ninja Falcon Zord in my hand, and I'm just like dead-eye stare. I could care less what's going on around me. There could be a volcano behind me, and nothing is going to unfixate my gaze on this toy. And to tie into this, as later in life I got into Funko and all of that, there ended up being, I believe it's a 6-inch version. Yeah. There is a 6-inch version of the robot. The robot part. Once Tiger Zord transforms there, once he goes into his little robot mode, they did a Funko Pop of that. I just sent you that picture in Skype, and I have that.
Oh, yeah.
It's still in storage, but man. Anything to do with Tommy Oliver, I absolutely love, because JDF was an amazing person, and yeah, that guy rules.
I was a major fan of his. When I was a young lad, Green Ranger was everything for me, and I probably brought this up on a previous podcast where I went to a Japanese superstore, big supermarket that had a toy shop and everything, and I saw before Bandai came out with it, the Green Ranger. And I was like, oh, there's no such thing as a Green Ranger. There's no Green Ranger in the show right now. But there was. I just saw a Japanese version of it. Probably at that point, he was probably 10, 15 years old as a character went in Power Rangers lore. But I saw it and I was so excited. And when I went back to school, I told my friends, there's a Green Ranger, guys. There's a Green Ranger. They're like, you're full of it. You're a liar. Get the hell out of here. And then there was a Green Ranger, and he was my guy. I wore green. I made a cardboard morpher for myself. He was my jam. So I'm going to keep pushing the gas down. We're going to move on to one of the last points. Oh, go ahead.
But wait, there's more.
There is.
You said you dressed like him. You had the Green Ranger, whatever.
Oh, yeah.
When he switched over to being the White Ranger. Never do this, kids. Make sure your parents never let you buy white jeans, because I had white. Once he went to I had white everything. So we are going to take a quick break, because I'm sure I'm probably going to have to insert some ads or something here. And then we want everyone to keep their scanners peeled as we talk about another amazing event from 2015 to the current day. We'll be right back. Right after this.
Hey all, PR here, inviting you to come over and check out my channel on YouTube. It's just youtube.com/PR, PEAUGH. We got Transformers for the most part. We got some action figures. Whatever really strikes my fancy and looks cool and feel like checking out. So come over here. We got some tabletop gaming now over there. But just a lot of fun. Thank you all for watching. I hope everybody's having a great time. And just come over and have some fun. youtube.com/PR. Thanks.
Hey, it's Wes from Poppin' Off Toys. Wanted to let you know about poppinofftoys.com. We can be your number one source for Funko collectible figures to add to your ever-growing collection. If you're in Nashville, Tennessee, we actually have a retail store that you can come by, 5916 Charlotte Pike. And for the rest of us, poppinofftoys.com is always open, and you can check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and even TikTok. And the name is just simply Poppin' Off Toys. Thank you so much, and always keep it poppin'.
Kid, keep your scanner peeled. Yes, Michael.
Ah, Knight Rider. You gotta love it. But you've never seen it, you bastard!
I'm working on it.
Yes, we have to get back to that. So anyway, Huff and the Kit Quest.
So I know we've covered this in the past. I'll do a quick brief overview. So my friend Mark and I are driving down to Bloomington Normal from Gurnee. He was visiting. He had moved to Florida. He flew back up. He wanted to go back to Bloomington Normal to load up some stuff to ship back to his new place down in Florida. So we're on our way down, and on the way down, we found this tiny little flea market right off the Interstate 55. And we're walking around. They have a couple of random toys. You know, most of the times you go to these flea markets, they're just a ton of dirty toys and broken stuff and nothing special. And there was a guy who had a trailer outside of the flea market, and he had just emptied out a storage locker that he had paid for, and he had a box of toys. And I started going through it, and I had asked him, like, hey, how much you want on this? And it was all vintage stuff, all stuff straight out of the 80s. Like, probably was in a bin for the last 20 years. And probably was in a toy box before that. And he said, oh, you know, I don't know, like, you know, I'm thinking $3 a piece. I'm like, okay, cool. So I'm digging through, and I start seeing stuff in there, and I'm thinking, okay, this is kind of worth it. This is not something that I should just buy 2 or 3 toys out of. This is worth buying the entire box. So I look at him, how much you want for the entire box? And he said $50. And Mark, being cautious and being a good friend, was like, I that doesn't sound like a good price. And I'm looking in the box, I'm looking at Mark, and I'm looking in, and I'm like, no, $50 is a good price. So I gave him $50. So we get the box, and we drive down, and Mark was getting, first thing Mark wanted to do when he got back into town, because he loved Bloomington Normal, and he still does. He was a huge fan of his usual haunts when he was down there, and he wanted to get a haircut from the same gal who cut his hair almost every year he lived there for about 8 years. Okay. And so while he was getting a haircut, I mean, what am I supposed to do? So I'm sitting in the parking lot, and I emptied out the tub of toys in the parking lot, and I'm going through it. And there was a lot of good stuff. He-Man, I know, was in there. I don't remember everything, and I wish I had more pictures of it. Mm-hmm. But we're looking at it, and I find what I knew was a characteristic Kenner figure of the time. 5 points of articulation, simple sculpt, and I couldn't quite place it. I'm thinking of what it was, and I wasn't really well aware of David Hasselhoff at the time, and I wasn't aware of Knight Rider. But I'm looking at it, and I look on his belt buckle, and it's like a K and an R together. And I'm thinking, what would a K and an R be? And I'm thinking carefully, really trying to figure out what it is. I'm like, oh, this is David Hasselhoff. And he was just recently in the news because of the hamburger incident, which is the genesis of my FloorBurger name.
Yes.
And I was so excited for it because, oh, this is fun. This is silly. This is great. Like this is so wonderful. So I got down to my brother where I was staying, and I went and looked through the entire bin. I'm like, oh, this is so great. And I started having fun with David Hasselhoff. I started doing funny things where it looked like he was drinking too much, or he was being silly, or just ridiculous. And it was just so much fun. Now, I didn't really think of, oh, I want to go get the car now. There was never really a point in my life where I was like, I want to go get the car and track all this down. It really wasn't my motivation at that point. I just had this really funny figure. He started traveling with me, started doing a bunch of random stuff, and I posted pictures of him. And Dave Draper, blah 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 blah. Dave,
it's like he's here.
We'll say Dave Draper. No, Dave Draper gave me the name FloorBurger, and I just decided I'm going to own it. That's fine. I'm going to take that. That's fine with me, because I also have a history, and you can ask Mark about this, where there was one night we were at Disney, and we were a couple of Disney cocktails in, and
Jesus, yeah.
I dropped my favorite pulled pork sandwich on the floor twice.
Oh, no.
First time I dropped it, I went and asked for a replacement. So I sat down, I put it all back together in the box that I had it in, and took it back to I gave it back to him. Second time I got it, I was so excited, and this is a brand new one, and I dropped it on the floor again, and I was just like, screw it, I'm just going to eat it, because they're never going to believe I dropped it twice. And so I already had a history of eating stuff off the floor, especially sandwiches, so it just worked. And time goes on, and my mom gets me another Michael Knight figure, and really unexpected, out of nowhere, but I was like, this is great. I have two now. So the one my mom got me was the one that was supposed to be the one that stayed home, and the one that I got myself was the one that would travel with me. So that way, if I lost it, the one my mom got me would be more sentimental, and it would stay. So eventually, I think I got another one at a toy show. I think I found another one for Draper, gave it to him as a gift, ironically. Or it was Das, maybe. I think I gave it to Das. And my mom also got me the Baywatch David Hasselhoff figure that's out there that I think was in the Barbie line.
Yep.
And she also got another one, which after she passed, I got that when I took it back home with me. It's now sitting. I have two of them, and one of them is sitting up on my random shelf with the rest of my pops, including that Lilu pop you were telling me about. And so
Lilu?
The Lilu pop from 2000.
Oh! Multi-pass. Got it.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes. So I decided it would be more funny to not spend the $200 or whatever on getting the kit car and just finding another car he could fit in. So David Hasselhoff, Knight Rider, would drive in every other car, from Ghostbusters to the Batmobile to Jurassic Park, whatever I could fit him in, that's what he rode in. And you can link to the podcast where I mention, where I go over the story of finding it at the flea market. But I randomly, this past summer, just a year ago, find the car at the flea market.
The car he found, folks, just a quick recap, is the complete 1982 or 83 Kenner Knight Rider voice card, the Knight 2000.
Yeah, and I had given up on finding it at that point. I didn't care. It wasn't like something I really wanted. I didn't really care to find it. I actually liked the fact that he was driving in the gold Cadillac from Last Action Hero more than Kit. I just thought it was funnier. I appreciated the humor behind that, because he just looked like this like crazy drunken person driving in this gold Cadillac. And just to find it was such a huge moment, because you don't really have finds that are that meaningful over that much time. I mean, we're talking about 7 years here of having this figure, of not really ever thinking I would ever find it. It just was this massive moment that you don't get in collecting, right? And bringing it back full circle, you obviously have been a huge fan of Knight Rider and Kit your whole life. You have, between the two of us, you're the only one who has a picture with David Hasselhoff. And
so it's funny. Yes, I have a picture with David Hasselhoff. And most people will find this really creepy, I guess. I don't know why I don't. I also have a autographed, like, it's not silhouette, but like self-portrait. You know how, like, in the old days, if you liked a radio, like if you liked a morning show DJ, just whatever your local town, like mine was Peter B. or Jane Norris or whatever it is, you could go to the radio station and you could get a signed, like 8x10 or whatever picture of that radio DJ kind of thing. So when I met him in 1986 and I had that picture taken, along with having the picture taken of me sitting in Kit, I also got this framed, like, self-portrait signed of him as well. So, yeah. Anyway.
See, yeah. And so you kept alluding to me having some sort of dark voyage on its way. And
No. Okay, so the people.
No. Let me finish the story from my perspective, and then you can explain.
All right.
So, we're just a little bit after Christmas, and you were doing your best to kind of support me as my whole world had changed suddenly, of my mom passing away very suddenly, and she was someone who really supported me in the Michael Knight thing. As much as we've talked about it, she's pretty instrumental in me having a couple David Hasselhoffs, and she loved it, and she always joked about the Hoff and everything with me, and loved it. And so you start telling me, oh, you have a dark voyage on its way, or whatever we were talking about. Well, hold on. So I'm humorously thinking that I'm saying this completely like ironically, like sarcastically.
You're incorrectly saying what I told you is what you're doing.
A dark trip, or what was it?
No. See, this is why you need to let me tell. So.
Okay.
Yes. First of all, I've lost the two most important women in my life since 2015. My mom passed away in 2015. That pain was immense and intense and everything else. And once I met Karen in 2017 and we had the life that we had for the 4.5 years we had together, the death of my mom was still painful, but it wasn't as painful because I had this new beginning of love and yada, 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 and all this and all that and everything else. Karen unexpectedly dies in 2021. So the loss of your mother, I completely understand where you are coming from because I've gone through it myself.
Yeah.
And all the times we've talked, whether it's on these podcast episodes or whether it's off air or whatever, because sometimes we will end up talking for about an hour before we hit record, folks. I asked you at one point, okay, you like the Hoff, you kind of like Kit, you like, Michael Knight, you like his characters, you like him. Have you ever seen Knight Rider? And you're like, no, I've never seen it. And I'm like, okay, let me know when you have some time. I am going to take you on a shadowy flight into the dangerous world of a man who does not exist.
Knight Rider, a shadowy flight into the dangerous world of a man who does not exist.
Oh, shadowy flight. Okay, that's how I described it. I was saying dark voyage. I don't know why.
No, this is not Star Trek. So a shadowy flight into the world of a man who does not exist is part of Knight Rider's tagline. And that's what they always use to promote the show and everything else. And at some point, we are going to sit down and I'm going to screen share with you or however the hell we're going to do it. And we are going to watch at least the pilot of Knight Rider together so you can see where all of this comes from.
Yeah, and I think the irony to me, and maybe I use that term incorrectly or whatever, but I think where I sort of get into it a little bit more is, in our little toy community, our tiny little toy community, I actually became well known for being a fan of the Hoff, yet I had never seen an episode, and that being the comedy behind it is what kind of kept me going. But so it's there's always going to be the possibility of me having a ton of other moments I'm missing or forgetting, but those are the ones that I can remember. My brain doesn't work the way it used to.
Yep.
And I'm hoping as I continue on this mission to collect and make sure what I collect is meaningful and memorable and has a connection to me, that maybe more stuff will pop into my brain. And I think one of the biggest moments, and I'm going to try not to get emotional as I go through this just because I talk a little bit better, but is my mom had come up in September, and this is before the hurricanes hit Fort Myers. And for anyone who's wondering, the hurricane wasn't what caused her death. It was an illness, a mystery illness she picked up afterwards that she just couldn't overcome. And so she had come up to visit before the hurricanes hit around September 11th, 12th, 13th, somewhere around there. And it was the first time she was visiting Illinois since she had moved prior to that. So it was about 2 years, just shy of 2 years that she was visiting for the first time. And she hadn't really seen her house finished before she moved. As far as finished, meaning like furnished and decorated and to kind of the point we wanted it to be. So it was really an exciting moment for me because she was coming to stay with me. And we had, initially she was coming up to go to my cousin's wedding because she had even said, she's like, I don't know when I'll see these people again. And that was kind of one of those moments that kind of gets you, when you think back to it.
Yeah.
Where she said, this might be my last chance to see some of the people who are going to be at this wedding.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, in the days leading up to the wedding, her godson, my cousin, passed away.
Oh,
and
man.
So, it gave a very different meaning to that whole wedding and that whole weekend of her coming up was, she came up Friday. My wife was out of town, so it was just me and my mom, and we got to cook for her, and it was really fun. And, I wanted to show her the Blue Room because, she knew that was such a big part for me. But unfortunately, I had a very crazy week leading up to that, and I didn't get a chance to straighten it out. And it's always perpetually in transition, so it's always kind of a mess because I'm always rearranging, moving stuff, and I start it and then leave it. It's a mess. So Friday she comes up, and we hang out down at the bar, and we grill, we cook. The next day we get ready, we go to the wedding. And she was in about as good as health as she could have been at that time. She still had her chronic illness, but it wasn't. That's a whole nother podcast maybe to talk about one day when I get more information. But we go to the wedding, and then the next day, my wife comes home, and I have to go take care of some stuff at work because of the funeral now being Monday. I had to go make arrangements to be out of work that day. So I went into work for, about an hour or two, and then came home, and I was like, Ma, I really want to show you the Blue Room. And she's like, okay, but I'm like, it's kind of a mess, so give me about an hour. So I raced upstairs, I straightened up the room, cleaned it up, probably, super quick, and got to bring her up. And I don't know if this is number 20 or 21 or whatever, but it doesn't matter. And the room was about as close as it probably would ever be to completion that obviously now that she would ever see. But because I've just been waiting for us to put in new flooring, I never finished all my displays. But it was clean enough that she could walk around and see it and check things out. And I was able to go and explain so much to her and point things out. And, we would talk about whether or not she remembered getting me some of these things, because there's so much in here that is from that she had originally bought for me, or I rebought, and it was something that she had got for me. And it was, my wife said she heard a lot of our conversation about me talking about, like I could point to a shelf right now and tell stories about, like there's a Kenner Aliens figure, this guy Drake, who was my favorite figure from that entire series growing up, and how he wound up outside, and I found him tied up by a bunch of pumpkin vines by the garden one year. Like, don't know how he got there, but he was all tied up by that.
Yeah.
And, the fact that I have the Chuck Norris Karate Commandos figure line, I have a bunch of figures from that, and how I know there were 3 variations of Chuck Norris, and I could tell you which variation belonged to each of me and my brothers. Like, we each had one, and I know which one was mine, I know which one was and which one belonged to my other 2 brothers. And the food fighters, and I could tell her all these stories about where stuff came from, like the Bots Master Jungle Fiver, and how that was something she got for me when we went out to the Kenosha Outlet Mall when she was taking me on a trip to just sort of, just mother-son sort of bonding trip to get me out of the house. And, there's just so many different things I was able to tell her stories about, and how important it was to me that she was in there at that time.
Right. Yeah.
Now, granted, if she didn't pass, would I have thought much of that moment? At the time, I was just like, oh, cool. She'll probably be up in, probably next summer, because she said she would never come up during the winter because of her health. But, she'd probably come up next summer. And, so I didn't really think anything of it. And I was hoping we'd have the flooring done by then, so the room would be done. But, we had a very long conversation about everything in here. And my wife had even said, she's like, it really sounds like what you need to do is focus more on collecting what is meaningful and what you have a connection to, not just like the newest Wolverine or something.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with her, because here's the thing. Like, there are some still in storage at my dad's, but my cousins went down to my dad's and brought up my desk and a lot of other things, and basically pretty much all of the Funko Pops that I had in storage at my dad's. And the thing is, I use the Funko app to just keep track of what I have. I don't use it for value or anything, like whatever they're worth or whatever. I just use it to make sure I know what I have. And I have close to 300 Funko Pops. Now, that is a lot. However, a lot of them are characters I love. A lot of them are characters that mean something to me. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I'm not going to go out and hunt down the entire Game of Thrones Funko Pop line because I have only ever seen 15 minutes of Game of Thrones Season 1, Episode 1. And all they did was fucking walk. I was bored as hell. So I'm not a Game of Thrones fan, and that's fine. But my point is, that's how I've approached collecting for the longest time, is that I only go after things that actually either characters I love, which apparently I love a lot of characters, and, you know, things that I actually want. I'm not here to have I'm not going to buy a character or a figure that I don't even like.
Yeah, and you know, it's not even just about like preference now. It's whether or not I continue collecting, you know, wide scale. Like, I'm running out of space. It's more,
you know, those Waterworld toys take up a lot of space, so.
I'll send you a picture eventually. You'll understand that you're right.
I know I'm right. Hello.
But you know, whether or not, like, I'm looking through a lot of stuff now, and, you know, how much am I going to keep? What am I going to hang on to? How much more can I get? And what it really is going to come down to is, if this is like my effort of having, my entire history isn't toys. My mom's history isn't just toys, but
yeah,
what if 20 years of collecting has kind of taught me anything, is that it's not so much what you have. It's not so much what I have. Everybody varies and everybody differs in your collecting preferences, but it's not so much what I have. It's what is the story behind it, and why is it there? Why do I have a packaged Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, Aragorn from the last scene where he's in his like king gear and stuff like that? I have a story for that one day I'll have to tell you, not right now, because we've been running on forever. But it's, why do I have that one in the package? Why do I have it loose? Why do I have the Muppets? You know, the Muppets, it was one of my mom's favorite collections, one of my wife's favorite collections. Why do I have? So I'm really trying to make sure that the things that I have right now aren't just things, that there's a story with them, and that's what I'm getting to, and that's what I'm focusing on, and it's making my brain work a little bit better. So I could probably continue to go on and talk more about lessons I've learned in 20 years of collecting, or I could go on to talk more.
That could be another episode. For right now, we're going to take a quick ad break because, like you said, long podcast, but it is your history. The last totally tubular 20 years of toy collecting with Josh the FloorBurger. We'll be right back to close the show after this. The Pull Bag is GCRN's comic book review and discussion-based podcast. Join me, TFG and Mike, and the rest of the GCRN crew as we discuss the comics we are reading right now. Inside the Pull Bag, you'll also find the origins of how guests got into or out of reading comics, after dark discussions, and so much more. You can find the Pull Bag every Wednesday, which is New Comic Book Day, only on geekcastradio.com and on anywhere you consume your podcasts. Make your great escape into comics and jump into the Pull Bag today. We are back here on Toycast, episode 170, and folks, we are on the road to 200 episodes. In the 180s, we're going to have most likely the top 100 toys countdown. The GCRN's top 100 toys countdown is coming this summer, so that's what's coming up for us. Josh, do you have any totally tubular toy thoughts for 2023 and beyond?
Again, I'm not going to try to match that alliteration. However,
I do it all without Chat GPT, just to let everybody know. Anytime you hear me alliterate, that's me on the spot. I ain't got no need for no artificial intelligence.
Well, you let me know when you get into the next alliteration rap battle, and I'll be there for it. But I guess one of the big takeaways as far as saying I've been a collector for 20 years is I'm not the same person at all that I was 20 years ago, nor should anybody ever be the same person they were 20 years prior. But right. I think being open to the fact that when you are collecting today, tomorrow, next week, if you're going to be collecting or doing anything for 2 decades, know that you're going to change. You might not still have that thing 20 years later. I had almost every Marvel Legends figure ever made. Mm-hmm. I think there was only a small handful that I didn't have. Of that original collection, I maybe have 2, like one or 2, you know.
Yeah.
And that was in the process of going through. Now, Marvel Legends is maybe a little bit of a phenomenon because they've updated, they've redone a lot of the figures in better, more modern styles. They look better. And you don't necessarily have that with something like Food Fighters. They never re-release those. So It's not like, oh, I'm buying a substitute or replacement. But even when I think back to collecting in college, which made up half this list, that was only 4 years of the 20 years of this. And sometimes when you are collecting longer, you have to remember to keep certain things, you know, into a level of significance. Don't let stuff just become blurry and get away from you, and don't let it just be stuff because
absolutely
go away in a blink of an eye.
Yeah,
for years.
Yeah,
figure that I had for I should check the date stamp on him, but I've had him for close to 20 years right now, and he's probably still one of the best Superman figures that ever came out. But I also have a variety of other things that have come and gone over time, and don't change everything you're doing. Just try to remember that this is supposed to be an adventure. It's supposed to be an experience. It's supposed to be something that brings you joy, that's fun, that doesn't work against you, that doesn't create pain and stress in your life, because then it's not a hobby, it's a burden.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things where, like I said, I know everyone has different collecting habits and whatever else, and everyone displays their toys differently, obviously, because not everyone is the same autonomous robot or anything like that. But I approach it as, okay, like right now, and it's only because of the cost of the damn thing. As far as Funko items between the Pops and the sodas, I have every single version of Batman Beyond, of Terry McGinnis Batman Beyond, except for one. And that one is the Fugitive Toys Red Eyes exclusive, because that figure is worth over $300. I will probably never have that, which is fine. I love the Batman Beyond characters that I have so far and everything else. You know, TMNT, I'm doing something really interesting with TMNT that I'll have to talk about next time, but because that's going to be fun. So, folks, this has been Josh the FloorBurger's top 20 toy talk topics of the last 20 years. That's a mouthful. Any other things you want to say before I run through the closing, sir?
I just feel old.
That's a pleasant surprise.
I mean, the fact that, you know, I'm looking at some figures on my shelf right now, like the original Beast Wars figures that survived that initial purchase, that are getting a legacy throwback now.
Yep.
And at the time, they were just shy of 10 years old when I bought them, probably like 5-6 years at that point, maybe a little less than that. And now it's a legacy throwback, as if it's when I was first collecting, and we're going to re-release G1 Optimus Prime because it's a throwback. You know, how charming and magical. Now the stuff that was even a throwback when I was getting it is getting the throwback treatment. It's just a redundant throwback experience.
Yes.
So, yeah, I feel old.
Yeah. We all feel old, folks. Getting too old for this shit. Thank you for joining us here on Toycast. If you'd like to get in contact with us or leave feedback for the show, there's several ways to do so. Visit the website, geekcastradio.com, where you can listen to and comment on all of our content. Send any email to feedback@geekcastradio.com. Just put Toycast episode 170 or whatever in the show in the subject line. Here are all the ways you can listen to us nowadays. Apple and Google Podcasts. Leave us reviews, please. Spotify and any other podcatching client you choose to use. I prefer Spotify. Follow us on Twitter at GeekCastRadio for the network, at TFToycast for the show. I am at TFG1Mike. He is at FloorBurger553 if you'd like to follow him. Become a fan on Facebook. Go to facebook.com/GeekCastRadio Network, and you can also search out Toycast or TF Toycast over there as well. Next time on Toycast, I think we're going to take it back to basics and either have an Origins or a display case, and then I know episode 172 and 173 are going to be Origins as well. I'm not going to reveal who those Origins are going to be, but they're going to be fun, as they always are. For now, I am TFG and Mike with...
Josh the FloorBurger, the old man in the room.
No.
In my room right now.
Well, maybe, because, I don't know how cat ears work. Do they work like dog ears? Anyway, join us next time when we'll be talking more toys here on Toycast.
Bye.
The things I'm forced to put up with.